In the year 2028, the apocalypse arrived and took over the Earth. At this moment, our protagonist was already out of ammunition. He was literally the last human being alive on Earth. Recalling the good times, he says goodbye while looking at a photograph. A monstrous hand appears, but he barely reacts as the creature lets out a piercing scream. He keeps looking at his photo expressionlessly until he grabs a rifle and slashes the monster. On top of a car, the protagonist shouts that he will kill many of these monsters, which number in the thousands. Everything is dark, and the man wonders internally if he is alive or dead while someone seems to be calling him. Upon opening his eyes, he finds himself in a classroom where everyone is staring at him harshly. He quickly gets up anxious. While the teacher reprimands him for sleeping in class, the students laugh at him, and he tries to comprehend the whole situation. The teacher tells him to sit down, but he is too confused by the situation and remains motionless. He then decides to go to the bathroom to splash some water on his face and realizes he has returned to his school days before the outbreak. Looking in the mirror, he notices that his scars are gone and that he seems weaker. He sees an infected in the mirror's reflection and immediately punches it. Realizing he was careless, he grabs a piece of glass as a weapon and turns to attack the enemy. Before he can strike, he realizes it's just a classmate and stops immediately. His eyes widen, and he is startled to realize that Gao Fei is in front of him. Gao asks the protagonist what got into him to act that way while examining the injury on his hand. At first, he didn't remember Gao because the memories were painful. But while bandaging his hands, he remembers that Gao died when the virus spread. Gao reminds the protagonist that it's Valentine's Day and asks if he has confessed to the girl he likes. After 10 years, he remembers this and gets irritated. Even though he had the courage to confess to the popular girl, he was ridiculed by her, who tore up his letter. However, Sui doesn't remember this day because of that, but because the outbreak began that afternoon. Around noon, he and Gao are sitting on the stairs when Duan, the pink-haired girl, appears. Duan and her friends look disdainfully at Sui, holding the letter he wrote for her. Sui snatches the letter from the girl's hand, saying that it's disgusting that she came after him just to say this. He questions what he saw in her 10 years ago and says that her behavior condemned many people during the apocalypse, and one of the people condemned because of this was his best friend, Gao. On February 14, 2018, a meteor entered the Earth's atmosphere, breaking into several pieces that helped spread the virus on Earth. At first, everyone who was infected just fell unconscious. Those who resisted the virus found themselves facing 70% of the world's population turned into zombies. The survivors created weapons to fight the infected, but they were evolving and increasing in number. Meanwhile, at school, there's still 1 hour left for everything to happen, and Gao asks Sui if he is writing a book. Gao asks what's going on with him, confessing to the idol and talking about the apocalypse. Sui changes the subject and asks him to buy food. He asks Gao to buy canned food and other things, telling him he wants to simulate an apocalyptic scenario for his book. Finally, he asks Gao to call his parents, asking them to buy medicine and meet at the abandoned boarding school. The protagonist's parents died a long time ago in a car accident, and he hopes Gao calls his. Running quickly, he reaches the abandoned boarding school, where many manage to survive for a long time. This place is useful because it has many materials for survival, and he also manages to find a crowbar. Already inside the boarding school, he prepares the crowbar and comments that the infected were slow at the beginning, so this place is a great shelter. He begins training and says he must do everything better this time, including getting close to Duan Churu again. The school's students go to the abandoned boarding school to confront Sui. The sports club representative starts fighting with the protagonist for making the idol look bad. This bully rolls up his sleeves and gets ready to beat up the boy. He easily stops the bully with a stick pressed against his head. In a dark tone, Sui says that one more step and he will kill the guy. Filled with fear, he kneels and doesn't try to react. Sui yells for everyone, especially the pink-haired girl, to get out of his sight. Outraged, the bully and his friends say that sooner or later they'll get rid of Sui. The idol decides to confront the sports representative, asking if he wasn't supposed to be good at fighting. He says the boy's face was terrifying, and he felt like he was going to die, so he decided not to do anything. Suddenly, what appeared to be shooting stars streak across the sky during the day. Meanwhile, in Japan, these meteors begin to appear as well. The same is true for New York, where Times Square is hit. The same thing happens in Rio de Janeiro, and people film it, believing it's shooting stars. However, the boy is the only one who knows what's really happening while people think it's a gift from God. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake, and they think it's an earthquake. But the protagonist knows the apocalypse has begun, and people are falling unconscious at this moment. At 2 p.m., hell began on Earth. A red-haired girl calls out for Xian, asking if she withdrew with the army. The red-haired girl's eyes roll back, and black liquid pours from them and her mouth. Sui starts calling out for her but realizes it's just a hallucination. Gao panics when he realizes an entire day has passed and they've been asleep. Tianchen tells him not to worry about it. The friend asks if he's okay, as he's been acting strange since the day before. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoes, and the friend asks what it is. Swa says it has started. At the moment he says this, an infected person appears, entering through the door. Gao believes it's just a teacher at work. He starts to approach the man with small talk. But before he could get closer, Swa quickly acts. He strikes the man on the head with a piece of wood, and the man collapses. His friend watches in shock, thinking it was an innocent person. He starts yelling at Swa, who quickly cuts him off and explains the first rule of survival: never hesitate in front of a zombie. With his back to his friend, Swa asks him to grab his backpack, and says that Gao is about to see that the world has changed forever. Gao wonders if he's dreaming as he looks outside. They both see several infected wandering the area. Some of these zombies are behaving aggressively until one of them seems to notice their presence. Quickly, the protagonist fends off the approaching zombie. While his friend is in a state of shock, Swa tells him to stay alert and dodge to avoid danger. He turns, leaving several incapacitated zombies behind. At that moment, the pink-haired girl and a friend of hers are desperately fleeing from the zombies. The bald guy hits a zombie with his baseball bat, telling Churu to run. Gao comments that the girl's friends were in trouble, and the protagonist says they should focus on their own safety right now. Suddenly, the hero pushes a zombie away to protect Duan. With his back to her, Swa throws the zombie off to the side, and the girl, crying, calls out his name. He tells Gao to stay close and not worry too much about the undead. Duan Churu laments when she sees one of her friend's headless bodies after it became infected. She then stands up and decides to go after them. At the school, zombies surround a room that is locked. Inside, the group of youngsters is seeking shelter. Swa tells his friend to catch his breath, while he realizes that his stamina is terrible compared to 10 years in the future. Duan begins to cry, and the protagonist tells her to shut up. The idol's friend points his finger at the boy and threatens him. However, Swa notices his bleeding wrist and asks if he is hurt. The bald guy says he's bleeding a bit because of Deming. At this point, the hero explains that the first infected came from the meteorite, and the next ones came from the bites. He says the virus is known as Ebola. He explains that the virus only affects humans and is spread by water, air, and direct contact, with direct contact being the worst form of infection. In other words, being bitten by them means the person will turn. The idol's friend gets irritated and accuses the protagonist of watching too many horror movies and hallucinating. Quickly, he retorts, saying the bald guy will turn in 10 minutes. Holding the baseball bat, he asks if he wants him to put him out of his misery. However, the man doesn't like that and tells him to back off. In a calm voice, Swa says he's already turned because he isn't even feeling pain. At this moment, the guy looks at his hands holding the bat and notices bulging veins on his arm, and his eyes widen. He tells the pink-haired girl that he'll be fine, but she tells him to stay away. Gao realizes that she betrayed him very quickly, even though he sacrificed himself to protect her. Suddenly, they hear a crash and realize the principal has crashed his car while fleeing, and several infected surround him. In a somber and impassive tone, the protagonist offers to kill him to solve his problem more effectively. However, the boy panics and tries to believe that Swa is lying. Swa calls Gao to leave the place. Quickly, Duan grabs his arm and asks to go with them. She lets go of her infected friend's arm, telling him not to touch her, but he just wanted to talk to her. With tears in his eyes and a melancholic expression, he starts to open up to her. But suddenly, a box cutter slashes his face horizontally. It was Duan who cut him, saying he should die alone and shouldn't have interfered with her escape. He raises his arm toward her but quickly gives up. Meanwhile, they run, and the protagonist advises them that zombies not yet evolved can be killed with blows to the head and spine. After his best friend hesitates a lot, he finally gathers strength within himself to attack a zombie. He hits it in the face with his axe and kills it easily. Seeing the blood dripping from the axe blade, he lets out a sigh of relief and feels good about what he did. The girl asks the two to wait for her, as she was so worried she couldn't catch up with him. Swa extends the blood-stained crowbar in front of the girl's face, and asks why she followed them again. Without directly answering the question, she only begs them to take her along. Gao asks Swa to take her too. Swa says he is indifferent. After all, they don't have time to deal with her right now. The only condition the protagonist places is that she follows his orders. Otherwise, she'll be in big trouble. Outside, several zombies still surround the area. Gao considers jumping over the wall, but his friend says it's too risky, and the plan is to turn on the loudspeakers to attract the zombies. And he comments that this will be their time to escape. His friend asks what will happen to him then, but Swa tells him not to worry, and he runs towards the room. Meanwhile, Gao asks the girl if she's okay, and she hesitantly says yes. Duan starts flirting with Gao in a strange way, thanking him for helping her earlier. Gao gets embarrassed by Duan's behavior, throwing herself at him. With her breasts pressing against his body, she begins to say that Zwa is very harsh, and Gao is the opposite of him. Internally, the girl plans a way to manipulate him, saying that because he is a virgin, it's easier. The boy laughs and agrees that he's a nice guy, but quickly takes a stern stance and asks her to stop talking about his friend. Meanwhile, the zombies are feeding on a teenager's body until 2 soda cans catch their attention. Attracted by the cans, the zombies move toward them. Zwa, who set the trap, says it's still easy to deal with zombies in the initial stage. Arriving at the broadcasting room, he wonders which button starts the transmission. Behind the protagonist, an infected person appears. Focused on the screens in the broadcasting room, he seems unaware of anything. The infected charges at him, but the protagonist grabs it by the neck with both hands. Straining to hold the zombie, he imagines it might be a semi-evolved one. Being pushed against the table, he knows he can't let himself be bitten, as he has no resistance to the virus. His eyes widen as he struggles to contain the monster. Beside him, he notices 2 sharp metal knitting needles. He begins to stretch his arm to reach the tool. While the infected is about to bite the hero's neck, he quickly strikes with the metal needles. He thrusts the tool with all his might into the infected's head. Within seconds, the zombie is dead and falls to the ground. He sighs in relief, grateful to be alive, seeing he came very close to death. Looking at the monster's body on the ground, he comments that he's surprised to see a zombie in the broadcasting room. He continues to laugh with relief, thankful that the infected was only semi-evolved. Looking at a framed photo in the hand of a pink-haired girl resembling the zombie, he imagines it could be her. He concludes that she was the school announcer and was knitting for her boyfriend, which explains the 2 metal needles. Suddenly, over the school loudspeakers, an announcement begins to play, saying that the exercises are starting. Zwa, speaking on the loudspeakers to attract the zombies, says the first exercise will be stretching and starts counting. Outside, Gao and Duan realize the plan worked, but they see the gate is locked. Gao strikes the gate's lock with his axe, breaking it easily, then pushes the gate open to create a path. The blonde boy asks Duan to watch the gate, but she nervously asks what she'll do if the monsters come back. Out of nowhere, the school bus appears, and the driver tells them both to get on. Duan urges the boy to get on the school bus, but he decides to wait for his friend. The girl bites her lip and seems displeased with his response. The bus driver asks Gao to get on. When the boy says he's waiting for Zwa, the driver says he saw him kill someone, and Duan says they should close the gate immediately. Another passenger agrees with the girl and says they should close the gate, while the driver continues pressuring Gao to get on. The girl keeps manipulating Gao to leave without his friend. However, he realizes this and says she's a dirty person who stabs everyone in the back. Angrily, the boy opposes them and says he will kill anyone who tries to close the gate. Duan's expression completely changes, and she becomes irritated. The passengers are in complete shock at the scene. Other passengers also look perplexed and wonder who the man is and what he is doing. Even with the driver saying there will be consequences and they should go to the city now, Gao remains unmoved and continues to be firm. The boy screams shrilly and exclaims that he got what he wanted as the bus departs. Meanwhile, behind him, a cadaverous hand approaches him. Suddenly, this hand grabs his jacket from behind and pulls him. He widens his eyes and is completely stunned. At this moment, he realizes it's a zombie trying to attack and bite him. The infected knocks Gao to the ground and climbs on top of him to try to bite him. Quickly, he puts the axe in the zombie's mouth to prevent it from biting him. Exerting force against the zombie's head, he uses both hands on the axe to avoid being bitten. Internally, he tells himself he won't be able to hold on much longer against the creature. He says he doesn't want to die like this, without a girlfriend. Suddenly, the zombie's head goes flying, disconnecting from its torso. Gao sighs in relief. In front of him stands Zwa, holding the crowbar he used to kill the zombie attacking Gao. With a calm expression on his face, Zwa extends his hand towards Gao and says he almost didn't make it in time. Walking through the forest, Zwa comments to his friend that not getting on the bus wasn't a mistake. If there had been an infected on board, it would have been worse. And going to the city is also a death sentence, according to Zwa. Gao comments that he's angry with Duan, and our protagonist says they should find shelter to rest. Talking to himself, our hero is thankful that Afei didn't get on the bus. The last time it all happened, a student hid his injuries and began to transform during the trip, where everyone panicked and had to flee from the vehicle. However, the loud sound of the crash attracted a horde of zombies who pursued the students. When Gao and Zwa were fleeing desperately and seeking shelter, the pink-haired girl did not let them in. At this moment, Afei gives up and comments that it's impossible for the girl to open the door. Completely overwhelmed with tears, the protagonist's friend tells him to run without him since he is injured. The protagonist, in that distant past, was weak and left his friend behind, fleeing alone. Now, in the present, his companion asks where his mind is wandering, offers him food, and says he knows a shelter. The The protagonist accepts the food and believes that God has given him a second chance to fix his past mistakes. In front of a garage, the protagonist asks if his friend is talking about this place. He replies yes because this garage belongs to one of his relatives, and by chance, they left the key with him. As our hero opens the garage door, he tells them both to be careful. When Gao is passing through the door, Swa tells him to close it well and check the place from the inside. Asking about the next plans, Gao says he wants to see his family, but the protagonist says he's looking for someone first. His friend, with a silly smile, asks if it's a girl or a potential girlfriend. The protagonist, with an ironic smile, says that Afei is very optimistic. The moon lights up the night in the streets of Japan at this moment. Outside Afei's family garage, several zombies bang on the door, trying to get in. Swa calms his friend, who has a worried expression on his face, saying it's impossible for the zombies to break in. The protagonist teaches his friend that they were infected with the same virus as these monsters, but they underwent mutations. Most people mutated suddenly, causing their bodies to collapse. However, a small number of people managed to resist the mutation and even control it. Through this control, they can enhance their bodies and even develop some resistance to the virus. Gao asks our protagonist how he knows all this. Swa tells his friend not to worry about it, and says he will teach him a breathing technique to increase his evolution speed. He begins to meditate, and calmly tells Gao to focus on every part of his body and if he feels any pain, to fight against it. He also mentions that the virus will accumulate in one part of the body, and that will be the path of evolution. Just like before, Swa's palms evolved. People like him are known as palm-line evolutionaries. This is the universal form of evolution, meaning his abilities have increased, making him average in all aspects. Last time, he had to go through a lot to learn this breathing method that led him to evolution. This time, however, he has an absolute advantage. This advantage is having experienced the entire last decade before everyone else. The landscape is of a chaotic and destroyed city. A boy in a blue striped jacket runs, holding the hand of a red-haired girl. The girl stumbles and falls, crying. The boy asks if she's okay, and the girl says she twisted her ankle. Suddenly, he looks back and sees a horde of zombies coming to get them. In a heroic act, he lifts her and carries her on his back. The girl tells Tianqian not to worry about her and to run away alone, but he refuses and says he will make sure she lives. He starts running desperately with her on his back. But up ahead, he realizes the bridge is broken. The zombies are quickly running after the two of them. He comments that there won't be any other way. The girl tells him again to let her go and run alone, but he refuses again. Gaining momentum, he tells her to hold on, and decides to jump from one side of the bridge to the other. With enough momentum, he jumps from one side of the bridge to the other, successfully landing safely with the girl on his back. Or so he thought. In reality, the girl slips and starts to fall off the bridge. He tries to grab her hand to keep her from falling. Both with outstretched hands try to hold on, but there's no time. Xianxian falls off the bridge, and Zwa can't save her. Sweating with fear, he wakes up from a nightmare, screaming Xianxian's name. While his friend seems to be having a rather exciting erotic dream, the day begins to brighten outside. Tianqian prepares a motorcycle to go after the person he mentioned earlier. Before he goes, his friend calls out to him. Smiling positively, he asks his friend to bring the girl back as soon as possible. Sarcastically, Tianqian says he would do that even if he hadn't asked. In an ordinary Japanese neighborhood, the protagonist apparently doesn't see any zombies. He gets on the motorcycle and makes the final adjustments to ride through the city after the girl. The protagonist asks his friend to be careful and not let anyone in. He retorts, saying he's not a child. Before he could finish talking, Zwa speeds up the motorcycle, and his friend tells him to come back soon. Focused, he grips the motorcycle handle and accelerates. In an instant, he speeds up and quickly heads off on his way. Gao orders his friend to return safely. As he rides through the streets on the motorcycle, he reflects that he didn't tell Afei the truth, and the girl was indeed his girlfriend in his previous life. Her name is Xianxian, the most important person in his life. But at this moment, the two of them are still complete strangers who have never met. He stops at a 24-hour convenience store. He says he doesn't remember these streets from 10 years ago. A can falls to the ground, surprising our protagonist. Two zombies come at him voraciously. Our hero grips the axe tightly in his hand and maintains a neutral expression on his face. In an aggressive and brutal impulse, the protagonist delivers an extremely swift and powerful blow to the zombies. In an instant, he has already taken care of the zombie threat, but a piercing scream emerges from afar. Gao wonders if it was humans who made that scream. Inside a car surrounded by zombies, we see two frightened sisters, with the older one trying to calm the younger one. The zombies are trying at all costs to break into the car. The window suddenly breaks, and the sister can't contain her fear of imminent death that takes over her body. One of the zombies gets into the car in the passenger seat. Tianqian appears and grabs the zombie by the pants, throwing it far away. The zombie crashes against the wall, breaking it. The difference in the protagonist's strength after meditating is noticeable. The older sister and the younger sister are shocked but relieved by the hero's presence. The other zombies look at him in astonishment. He delivers a powerful kick to the creature's heads. His kick sends the monsters flying away. The little girl looks in awe at her savior. He moves extremely quickly behind another zombie and grabs its torso, executing a suplex that slams its head into the ground. The girl thinks everything her hero is doing is amazing. After these moves, he realizes that his strength and reaction time have truly increased, making him one of the strongest in the world. 2 more zombies charge at him, and he doesn't back down at all, quite the opposite. Within moments, the problem is already solved. The 2 zombies are already defeated by now. He seems a bit tired, and there's blood on his face, while the girl's sister thanks him. Tianqian tells her they should go to a safe place and recommends they go to the 24-hour convenience store. The sister asks what he will do, and the protagonist tells her he'll go later. They head toward the store until the little girl comments that her teddy bear is missing. While the protagonist is pouring gasoline on the car, he notices that the lines on his hands, indicating his new abilities, are showing. With a sort of sixth sense, the protagonist feels that there are still zombies nearby. The younger sister asks the older one if the boy will be okay and says she wants to leave the store to make sure, but she concludes that she should take her sister with her and grabs her hand. Meanwhile, a horde of zombies charges at the protagonist, who coldly assesses the situation. With a lit cigarette in his mouth, he throws it toward the gasoline he poured on the car. In an instant, the car ignites, and a massive explosion causes the flames to consume the zombies. While this happens, the hero stands with his back turned, a cold expression on his face. The older sister is holding a cleaver in her hands as she witnesses the car explosion. In the reflection of her eyes, we see a kind of doubt and despair regarding the protagonist. He questions her about why they aren't waiting inside the store. Back at the convenience store, the boy asks the little girl if the other is her mother, and she says she's her sister. In his hands, he shows a teddy bear, saying he found it inside the car. The girl thanks our hero a lot, who is happy with her gesture. While he drinks water, the girl asks if he found her sister attractive, and he says yes. Bluntly, she asks why he doesn't become her brother-in-law and start dating her sister. He gets irritated and says kids shouldn't say things like that. The older sister says she doesn't like the idea of taking food like this since it's stealing, but the protagonist says that if she doesn't do it, others will. She comments that she was a teacher at a girls' school until yesterday, and in the blink of an eye, the whole society collapsed. The protagonist is surprised and asks enthusiastically if the school was Xingxing, and the woman says yes. Holding her shoulders, he asks if she knows Surua Xian. She first asks him to let go, and he apologizes. But she comments that yes, she is Xian's teacher and asks if the boy knows her. With a more downcast tone, he says they are friends, but internally he knows they haven't met to that extent yet. The older sister says that Xian is smart, and nothing should have happened to her, and that she might still be at the school. Realizing the danger the protagonist is facing for Xian, she asks if they are friends or dating. Suddenly, she gives him a kiss on the cheek, which leaves him embarrassed. He is confused, and she says it is a thank you kiss since they are parting ways now. The younger sister, crying, asks if they can follow the boy since he is nice and will protect them. The older sister says not to bother the man since he has his own matters to resolve and that one day they will meet again. The boy gently places his hand on the girl's head and asks if her sister knows how to drive, and she nods. He tells them to hurry as they are about to leave. Now outside, the 3 are on Tianqian's motorcycle while he drives. The woman comments on how scary it is to see the world in ruins like this. To try to calm them down, the protagonist says they should think of it as a horror movie virus. He quickly parks and says they have arrived at their destination. He stops in front of a car and says that breaking into this type of car is his specialty. The older sister scolds him, calling him a student and saying that this is illegal. She also says they should go to a police station to look for Xian, but he doesn't seem to like the idea. He points to a police officer turned into a zombie and asks if that's the officer they should be asking for help. The teacher is shocked. The protagonist asks her name. Facing the zombie police officer, she responds that her name is Luo. Stepping forward, he strikes the police officer in the face with the crowbar, killing him. The protagonist says the world has changed into something beyond her imagination. Luo is terrified while the little girl is impressed, and Zhu's expression seems more violent. As he searches the corpse, the protagonist comments that the police officer had good equipment but no weapon. Dressed in the police uniform, he remarks that regular infected shouldn't be able to bite through these clothes. Handing a weapon to the teacher, he tells her that public order is gone, and she should focus on protecting herself. He says he has done everything he can for them and that he modified the car. He tells them to go find Gao, saying they came because of Zhu Tianqian. The teacher concludes his name is Zhu, and he agrees. The sister says her full name and that of her younger sister, which is Luo Xiaoshui, and asks the hero to be careful. As the teacher accelerates the car, our protagonist speeds up his motorcycle. She orders the boy to return safely, and he says he will. The teacher drives calmly until her sister says she might miss her chance when he finds his girlfriend. The older sister, in a more melancholic tone, says she knows but there's nothing she can do. The younger sister says that adults are strange. There is an enormous and unusual traffic jam throughout the city. The protagonist realizes that not even his motorcycle will get through this traffic. He gets off the motorcycle and decides to walk, but something ahead catches his attention. Noticing a police car in the middle of the line of cars, he imagines there might be a weapon inside the vehicle. Looking through the window, he sees a dead police officer with his head on the steering wheel. And looking at the seat, he notices a simple gun lying around. Suddenly, a zombie slams its hands on the glass and makes a noise. In the blink of an eye, someone flies out of the car. The glass shatters right in front of Zwa. An extremely strong man in a suit seems to have thrown the zombie away, commenting to himself that there are cars all around and it's not possible to move away from the infected. The zombie lets out a huge scream when a shard of glass hits its forehead. The protagonist looks stunned and quickly smashes its head against the nearby car. But the moment the infected's head is smashed against the car alarm goes off, as do all the others. We see the protagonist using a combat knife to stab another zombie. Crouched in front of the newly dead body, he says it won't be possible to fight a horde in the middle of this sea of cars. He knows he will need the police officer's weapon. Meanwhile, at the school, the dark corridor leads to a specific room, the first grade class 4 room. Inside the room are 3 high school girls. A red-haired girl with yellow eyes is in a catatonic state, hugging her knees. Another girl comments that she sees someone on the street. They comment that he killed several monsters but set off the car alarms, and now a horde is after him. On top of the police car, he counts the bullets and realizes that 35 won't be enough. He jumps from car to escape the zombies, but he is slowly being surrounded. One of the girls asks why he's on top of the bus instead of running, and her friend says it's to avoid being surrounded. But a daring zombie climbs onto the bus and comes face to face with the irritated protagonist. In a swift move, he strikes with his crowbar and throws it far away. He comments that unless it's absolutely necessary, he won't use the pistol. With that, he continues attacking other zombies with his crowbar, crushing their skulls and sending them to hell. He shouts for the zombies to come at him, saying he will kill them all. The girls discuss whether they should ask him for help because they don't know his intentions or if he will survive this situation. In total frenzy, the protagonist attacks the zombies madly, killing them all, determinedly affirming to himself that he won't die there. The sun sets in the background. Hundreds of infected bodies are lying on the ground. Zwa leans on his axe as dusk arrives, along with the last zombie. He feels his strength fading and realizes he needs to rest, but the zombie charges straight at him. The creature gains momentum and leaps toward the protagonist. Quickly, he puts the bar of his crowbar into the zombie's mouth, making it bite down on the metal. The protagonist pushes the crowbar against the zombie. He gets irritated with the zombie, calling it weak, saying it hasn't even evolved to the second stage. And he delivers a powerful blow to the monster's head to kill it instantly. The infected flies off the bus. A huge bang is heard. A shot from a pistol explodes the head of another infected. Tired, the protagonist finishes off the zombie with a shot to its head. Completely exhausted, the hero falls to the ground and tries to use this moment to test his resistance to the virus. The black-haired girl tells Big Sister Sha that the boy killed all the zombies. She is surprised and asks about his current condition. The girl replies that he seems to be resting while the other asks if there's any chance he might save them. Meanwhile, in his deep, personal meditation, he realizes it is time to organize and modify the cells of the Ebola virus and gather them in their place of origin. After the first stage, the gathered spots will form a pattern that will increase his physical abilities. He activates the 10,000 abilities system. He imagines he should now be able to kill non-evolved infected much more easily since he has twice the strength of a normal human. Even without testing his other abilities yet, he assumes they must be strengthened. But most importantly, his recovery and immunity. Now he can sense objects within a radius of 5 meters, and if he activates his perception mode, it goes up to 20, but it restricts his movements. However, the spiritual system is much more powerful. Before, Xian could see an entire kilometer. He wonders if Xian is at the school. Looking toward the school, he says he is going to meet her. The sky is illuminated by the moon on this dark night. As he focuses on his senses, Zwa detects 2 nearby vital signs that he believes are infected. Knowing his range isn't that great, he assumes there must be more of them, so he throws a can to distract them. The 2 zombies are attracted by the sound and run toward the can. He spots about 5 zombies on top of a wall. He notices that they are 5 non-developed types, and with his current abilities, he thinks it will be easy to handle them. It is a perfect moment for him to test his abilities after his evolution. He jumps down from the wall he was perched on toward the group of infected. As he lands, he brings 2 zombies to the ground, crushing their heads. He feels that his coordination and reflexes have increased threefold. The other zombies rush toward him while he still holds the 2 bodies in his hands. He realizes that difficult moves seen in movies, he can now easily perform in real life. Executing a precise cut, he eliminates 3 heads at once in a single strike. In his current state, first-stage zombies are no longer a threat to him. Inside the classroom, the girls' resources are running low, and they fear dying of hunger. They discuss whether they should go out at night through the corridors to look for food. The red-haired girl with yellow eyes decides to grab the flashlight. The 3 of them head out together into the corridor in the middle of the night. With their flashlights pointed ahead, they sneak through the corridors. They decide to split up to search for supplies. The girl with yellow eyes starts searching through her classmates' backpacks to find something. Under a desk, she finds a bottle of water. She celebrates her discovery. Suddenly, one of the girls is startled and can't hold back a scream. Tianchen, entering the school, realizes there are people there because of the scream. The pink-haired girl becomes worried and asks the hamster to let her go because she is concerned about her friends. Outside the classroom, one of her friends runs frantically while an infected student chases her. The girl runs desperately, and the yellow-eyed girl shouts for Xiaoling. But it is no use. In the blink of an eye, Xiaoling is bitten on the neck by an infected student. Behind her is another dead friend, and in front of her, Xiaoling is being eaten alive by a zombie. The zombie devours the girl's neck. The other girl agonizes on the ground as her life fades before the eyes of her surviving friend. The infected notices the presence of the only living girl. Quickly, the girl starts to run frantically, but the infected one chases her. Inside the school, Zhuo realizes that the noise he made earlier attracted many infected, which he did not expect. He draws both pistols, finally ready to use them, as he doesn't want to get hurt. He quickly starts shooting at the zombies. As the gun cools down, the protagonist notices the infected are evolving, and he wonders if it's supposed to be this fast. Reloading the magazine, he notices he only has 25 bullets left and knows he needs to conserve them. In the dark corridor, lit only by the moon, we see several zombies lying on the ground. Looking to the side, he sees zombies trying to attack a window. To check if there are any survivors inside the room, he decides to use his detection ability. The surroundings are safe, but inside the room, he senses the presence of a girl. He grips his weapon tightly. The girl, crying and hugging her knees, begs the zombies not to come in. Suddenly, she notices the noise has stopped. Relieved, she wonders if the infected have gone away. Someone knocks on the door, and the girl is startled, falling back. But since it's a human voice, she calms down. She opens the door with a smile, coming face to face with Tianchen, who has a serious expression. She quickly asks if he has any food because she is very hungry. The protagonist gives her food and water for her pet. While the girl devours Sua's food, he asks if she knows Xian, and she says everyone knows her since she is the queen of the school. She asks if he is looking for her, and he nods. She comments that many people fled earlier, and others hid, and if she's at the school, she's definitely hiding. The protagonist is surprised by the girl's necklace and asks her where she got it. She exclaims for him to let go since the item is hers, and she asks what he is trying to do. Our hero asks the girl if her father is Luo Rehang. The girl asks if he knows her father, and the protagonist says they are friends. He puts his hand on her shoulder and says he will take her to see her father. She lets go of his hand and says she has no desire to see her father. However, she says she will follow him since he has food. With a lit cigarette and a half smile, he says that's good, too. They then shake hands, sealing a deal between them. We see a ruined, seemingly deserted place from the protagonist's past. Zhuo and Luo, the girl's father, walk together searching for resources, but they seem unsuccessful in their quest. Suddenly, our hero senses something strange. He tells Uncle Luo that something is wrong, and the man says he noticed it too. A green creature with an erratic and sinister form emerges from the shadows. Several green roots form its bizarre body, and its eyes glow red. The protagonist comments that it's the claw type. Internally, he considers that the 2 of them alone won't be enough. Luo tells him not to panic and asks him to cover him while he deals with the creature. They comment that they need to finish this quickly. In the blink of an eye, the creature flies at Uncle Luo, who is already wielding his 2 machetes. He quickly delivers several powerful slashes to the creature. It screams in pain but retaliates, throwing the man away. As Luo is thrown, he breaks through the walls he passes. He calls out for Tianchen, who understands the message and starts shooting at the monster. The monster looks at the hero with a hateful expression as his ammunition runs out. Suddenly, the monster charges at him with full force, and our survivor looks completely desperate. Before it can strike, Luo cuts off one of the creature's arms with his machete. Pivoting his foot back and gaining momentum, he prepares to deliver another blow. He slices the creature into several pieces, finishing it off. The two sigh in relief because this time it was really close. And Zwa, surprised, asks how Luo suddenly got so fast. He opens his shirt and shows his body, revealing his well-defined physique and showing that he has evolved. Tianqing says he expected nothing less from number one, and a modest Luo says he should train in the breathing techniques he developed. In the middle of a military fort, they start talking. Luo seems distracted, looking at something, and his friend notices and asks what it is. He looks at a pendant he gave his daughter for her birthday, a pendant both of them have. Surprised, the protagonist questions him about having a daughter and never mentioning it before. The man says her name is Luo Lan Sha, and because he is a soldier, he doesn't spend much time with her. Zwa asks where she is, and crying, the girl's father says she must be 18 now, if she is still alive. As he says this, more tears stream down his face while the cigarette remains lit in his mouth. With his hand on his face and in a regretful tone, the father says that when the virus spread, he was on a mission and could have been with her at the time, and that if he had been with her, he would have ensured her safety. With a reassuring smile, the protagonist says that the daughter of someone as strong as him must be strong too. In the present, in the classroom, the girl begins to meditate and use the breathing technique. Following the boy's instructions, she continues practicing meditation, and he says they will leave the next day. He notices she is successfully gathering the virus cells, even though it isn't much. It will be enough. He lights another cigarette and goes to the window to smoke. Before being reborn, Uncle Luo, the mentor and friend of our protagonist, went through a lot to master these exercises, and Zwa was his only apprentice. Now, after reincarnating, Zwa is teaching these techniques to his daughter, making him wonder if it could be fate. At the top of the school, inside the emergency stairs, we see bloodstains on the door. The blood-soaked stairs lead down to a specific place, a semi-open door. Inside the room, an infected person on the floor seems to be emanating a different energy. Its cells are evolving. They appear to be multiplying and enhancing, evolving to the next stage. Suddenly, what was once a common infected seems to have become a much worse threat. Back in the classroom, the protagonist talks to his friend's daughter. He asks her if she knows how to use a gun, and she says her father probably taught her. The protagonist advises her to keep the gun's safety off, as any situation could be dangerous. When the boy says she understood everything quickly, she responds it's because she's seen many people die. He advises her to practice in silence, and the girl, questioning if he killed all the zombies with his technique, says she wants to be stronger than him. He replies that she must practice if she wants to achieve such a feat and asks her where the generator is. The girl explains that the generator is in the basement behind the storage room, and it's very dark there. Using his perception ability, he doesn't detect any zombies nearby. Wanting to ensure there's no one else left in the school, he thinks about making an announcement over the loudspeaker. Even though he thinks finding the generator room is important, he feels something is off. He remembers the rope he found in the police car and considering it's the 3rd floor, it should be enough. With that, he hangs the rope and starts descending, knowing he can't waste time on zombies. Climbing down the rope, he quickly reaches the storage room. The feeling of insecurity permeating the environment was coming from this place. Because of this feeling, he wonders if the infected have already mutated. With his weapon in hand, he knows he must go in no matter what and activates his perception ability. Even with his 6th sense, he doesn't feel the presence of any infected. Calmly, he opens a door, cautiously pointing his weapon at any possible threat in front of him. He notices that the basement is quite large, and his detection might have failed, so he must be careful. 2 bright red eyes seem to be watching the protagonist. Behind him, the creature appears ready to attack. Finally, he finds the generator room and slowly opens the door. He immediately encounters an infected woman who gets up aggressively within seconds. In less than a second, he fires the gun, hitting the zombie in the head. However, unexpectedly, an evolved infected appears behind him, attempting to land an attack. Before being hit, he manages to notice the blow, and realizes it's a 2nd stage infected. The monstrous creature delivers a massive punch to the ground, causing enormous damage, but our hero manages to dodge it. He starts running extremely fast, irritated by the zombie's accelerated evolutionary rate. With his vast knowledge of the infected, he knows that from the 2nd stage, their bones become fortified, especially the skull. He knows that having a heavy weapon would make things easier. Quickly, he strikes the zombie with his axe, and realizes it had no effect, so he must escape as quickly as possible. The monster knocks down a door, while the protagonist runs up the stairs in a strategic retreat. The creature continues screaming at him. He taunts the creature, asking if it really thinks it can kill him after following him to the surface. In an open area, the protagonist has the advantage of fighting the creature without haste. He swings the crowbar at the zombie's jaw, causing it to spin and fall down the stairs. Falling down several flights of stairs, the zombie seems to suffer significant damage. However, it quickly gets up as if nothing had happened, letting out a thunderous roar of rage that the whole school can hear. Luo Lansha is startled when she hears the roar. The zombies seem attracted by the sound and start running through the corridors. They seem hypnotized, heading towards the sound. They begin to move through the courtyard towards the storage room. Realizing that the zombie isn't stopping its scream, the protagonist concludes it must be calling other infected. He leaps while striking the evolved infected to stop it from continuing to call other zombies. The move works, and this time the zombie appears to be hurt. Immediately, the protagonist steps on it and prepares for another series of attacks. Consumed by anger and euphoria, he delivers multiple blows with his weapon. Gritting his teeth and overwhelmed by rage, the protagonist yells at it to die already. But he notices more infected coming up the stairs. The evolved infected quickly gets back up. Realizing there are too many infected around, our hero thinks of climbing the stairs to gain an advantage. He quickly dodges another punch from the buff zombie, and decides to retreat at lightning speed. The buff zombie starts chasing him, along with 4 others it summoned. Using his ability, he detects the presence of the 4 zombies. He realizes this zombie hasn't fully evolved because second stage ones can summon 10 at a time. Gaining momentum from the wall and planning an attack, the protagonist intends to end this quickly. The zombies look at him. Firing consecutive shots from his weapon, the protagonist hits the buff zombie. He quickly switches weapons, grabbing his crowbar and striking the first stage zombies. They all seem hurt, but the evolved buff one appears to be getting more irritated. With a bullet lodged in its forehead, it looks deeply annoyed. Our protagonist knows that the pistol bullets won't kill the zombie but will slow it down. And with this delay, he creates an opening to attack with his crowbar. They lock eyes at the moment of the strike. Thus, the protagonist manages to knock down and kill the buff zombie with his attack. The scariest thing about these second stage zombies is that they can call for backup and make stealth attacks. With the zombie dead, the protagonist decides to go back and turn on the electricity. Looking down, he sees that the zombie attracted all the zombies to the first floor of the school. Back in the school corridors, he finds an infirmary. Entering, he grabs a medical emergency kit, taking medicinal alcohol, among other things. Opening the window, he starts throwing the alcohol. The zombies are startled by the bottles of alcohol being thrown. Some even hit a few infected on the head. Finally, he lights a bottle with a lighter and throws it out the window. All the gathered zombies are set on fire by the Molotov cocktail. Lua watches the flames from the top floor. Seeing how strong the flames were, she is impressed. At that same moment, the lights come back on in the school, and the girl notices this. Our protagonist begins to test the school's loudspeakers. The girl says she understands now. When he calls for Xian, he realizes he said her name affectionately and corrects himself, calling for Surua Xian. He announces he is there to save her and that if she is still in the building, she should meet him at the gate the next day. He says that even if she finds it strange since they don't know each other, he asks for her trust. He hopes to find Xian at the school the next day. Night falls at the school. Our hero returns to the classroom with Luo, who says she heard the announcement and understands their situation. Luo believes that Sua had a love at first sight for Xian, fell madly in love with her, and is some kind of stalker. He interrupts her with a pat, saying she's making all this up. Finally, he asks her to rest since they'll be leaving early the next day. The day dawns, and Luo Lansha has just woken up from a restless night's sleep. Sua is already up and says they are leaving, and Luo tells him that Xian is at the gate. Impulsively, he runs toward the outside of the school, passing by several of the zombie bodies he killed the previous day. With his back turned, he sees the most important person in his life, Xian. Internally, he is happy to see her again. He gets excited and shouts Xian's name, but when she turns around, it's a completely different person. Our protagonist is confused and stunned, not understanding. Regaining his senses, he asks the two if they have seen Surua Xian, and they say no. The two completely unknown girls start flirting with the protagonist, telling him to stay with them. Sharply, he tells them to get out of his sight immediately. They are scared by the way he speaks, and even Luo's hamster tells them to scram. Luo asks her hamster to stop. The protagonist angrily asks the strange girl if she was bitten. He starts cursing at her for being bitten and not saying anything. Pointing the gun at her face, he concludes that she must have been bitten about 20 minutes ago and will transform in an hour. The strange girl says it was just a scratch and that nothing will happen, but her friend gets irritated and pushes her. The other friend claims she wasn't scratched and asks to be taken along. Her best friend grabs her arm, saying she gave her water, and the other says she doesn't want to die. Begging to be taken along, the betraying friend claims she'll do anything and calls her friend a monster. Suddenly, in an instant, the almost transformed strange girl bites her friend on the shoulder. The three of them look at each other in absolute shock at what just happened. The friend tells her to let go of her shoulder because it hurts a lot. Saying she's a monster, she declares she'll take her friend with her, and they will both transform. Our survivor says she's almost transformed, which means the other one is also infected. She falls to her knees, saying to herself that this is impossible, and she doesn't want to die. Meanwhile, her friend laughs maniacally after committing such an evil act. Seeing this situation, the protagonist appears indifferent and says that Xian isn't at the school. While the girl cries, he and Luo leave through the front gate of the school. Shocked, the protagonist says his motorcycle is gone, which means they will have to walk. Looking at the hamster, he asks if its name is Shangbiao and says it will be very useful because it's special. Saying he feels something coming from inside Shangbiao, it seems like it has evolved somehow. He comments that the only research on the apocalypse is based on the experiences that happened to them. Luo asks how he knows so much if the incident happened only 4 days ago. Our protagonist replies that he went back in time and that the hamster might have powers they don't know about. Suddenly, Zua hears gunshots in the distance, and Luo responds that there is a police station nearby. She says they should check out the police station, and Luo replies that they will be safe with the police. He nods and laughs sarcastically. Approaching the police station, they see a shootout where officers are shooting at zombies surrounding the place. Many zombies are shot in the head and fall dead instantly. The officers' fire bursts from their guns, spitting bullets at high speed. Taking cover behind the police cars, they shoot the infected, and Luo watches the scene in shock while Zwa seems indifferent. One officer talks to Mr. Lin, saying they won't last much longer since they're running out of bullets. Mr. Lin asks them to hold on a bit longer, as they've only had time to evacuate half the citizens. Following the order, the officer tells them to form a defensive line. Luo, disappointed on the ground, says she thought this place was safe, and the protagonist responds that there are no safe places anymore. Putting out his cigarette, he seems to make a decision, and Luo asks where they are going. Activating his detection ability, he sees 4 zombies in the area. He tells her to wait there and not let her guard down. Entering the building, he encounters only 3 of the 4 zombies he detected. They notice the protagonist and charge at him. Quickly, he sweeps their legs, and as he knocks the zombie to the ground, he also tears its head off. Luo's hamster starts growling as the buff zombie tries to hit the protagonist. In response, he swings his crowbar into its face. As he prepares to strike the buff zombie, he notices something. Behind Luo Lansha, the 4th zombie appears, ready to bite her, but the protagonist manages to warn her in time. In shock, Luo turns to the zombie, trembling with fear. As she reaches out her hand for Luo, the zombie prevents Zwa from helping her. Irritated by this, the protagonist slaps the zombie in the face. A slap that breaks the creature's jaw, and then he crushes its head. Twisting its head back and breaking it with a superhuman strength, he yells at the girl to shoot the zombie behind her as quickly as possible. The girl, trembling, aims at it, telling it to back off. The moment the zombie growls and charges at her, the girl fires without hesitation. The powerful shot blows off half the zombie's face. It immediately falls lifeless to the ground. With the gun barrel still hot and smoking, the girl breathes a sigh of relief. At that moment, while she is in a state of shock, the protagonist extends his hand to her with a light, friendly smile. She apologizes for getting distracted, and he just advises her always to be aware of her surroundings. He congratulates her for killing her first infected. He says they can see the fight through the window, and the girl asks why they don't help in the battle. He replies that this kind of shooting attracts zombies from kilometers away, making it very dangerous. Zwa says it would be suicide since it's 10 police officers against 10,000 undead. Luo tells them to get out of there, but our most beloved survivor says to wait. Smoking on the balcony and watching the police, he says they will take their weapons when they leave. Outside, the shootout continues fiercely. The officer tells Oldlin they can't hold on much longer and must retreat. Shouting, Oldlin tells all units to prepare to retreat and return to the original formation. Luo, who is watching the scene, informs the protagonist that they are retreating. Saying he searched everywhere, he shows that he only found a knife and a few other things. Luo asks if they can try using the car key to find the corresponding vehicle and use it. The protagonist hands her a knife to use as a backup since they are running out of ammunition. Suddenly, without any apparent cause or intention, she strikes with the knife at Zwa, who just catches it between his fingers. The girl retorts that she was following his advice to gain experience through tough fights, and she doesn't want to be a burden. She also questions why they haven't encountered any evolved infected, and he responds that only 1 in 100 evolves. Explaining to her, he says that the second stage improves speed and strength, but they are still within human capacity. The problem is that they gain the ability to make surprise attacks and summon other infected. He comments that heavy weapons are quite effective against them, and the next stages won't appear for a long time. Asked about the time it takes for them to evolve, the protagonist responds that the second stage takes between a week and a month. Noting through the window that the infected are following the police as they retreat, he sees this as their chance. With the moon lighting their path, they both descend the building and head to the street. Using the car remote, they find the corresponding vehicle. They gather the supplies and use the car to get to the police station. The protagonist tells Luo to stay close to him since there still might be zombies around. He also asks her to leave her pet in the car and take everything out of her backpack. Binoculars observe the two entering the building. The guy using the binoculars tells his boss that the police and zombies have disappeared. His boss tells him to give more information. He comments that a couple entered, and the girl is quite pretty. Finally, they say the two have already entered the building. The boss, with an intimidating expression, asks if he's messing with him. He orders his other two henchmen to go get more weapons at the police station. He also plans to kidnap the girl. On the cold, dark night, they walk down the street. 3 henchmen and their boss, all with a thuggish posture. Entering the police station, several mutilated bodies are scattered around. Blood is spread across the room and the furniture. The protagonist concludes that the police cleaned up the area and says to check the storage room, and Luo suggests they split up. Going to the second floor, he tells the girl to be careful, and she nods. Climbing the stairs and using his detection ability, he doesn't see any infected. Trying the doorknob, he finds the door locked and quickly decides to kick it down and break it open. With the door wide open and on the floor, he finds the storage room. He can't contain a reaction of surprise at the environment he finds. Happy, he says he hit the jackpot. Opening a black box, he finds 2 simple pistols. Holding 2 other larger guns, he wonders if this is all the police equipment. He realizes they didn't have time to check this batch, so if he keeps looking, he will surely find many weapons. Some time passes, and Luo finds bulletproof vests, batons, helmets, but no weapons. She seems bothered by the lack of equipment there. Hearing the sound of a can being kicked, she thinks it's Tiancheng, but she comes across 4 thugs armed with melee weapons. The boss tells his 2 brothers to search the upper floor while he and his other henchmen will check this floor. Quickly noticing the presence of strangers, Luo arms herself with the pistol. Aware that it could be a dangerous situation, she decides to hide. The moonlight illuminates the storage room, giving a clear view of the furniture. A noise indicates someone is opening the door. A crack opens, and yellow eyes observe through it. Luo sees one of the henchmen talking to his boss about the storage room. The boss scolds him and hits him to make him stay quiet so that the two don't notice their presence. The girl realizes at that moment that the men know they are in the building. As the 2 men decide to check the direction where she is hiding, the girl keeps her weapon pointed. They pass by closely and don't see anything useful in the surroundings. Just as they start to leave and decide to check another place, the girl lowers her weapon. But suddenly, the door swings open, and a man in a yellow jacket appears. Luo continues to point her gun at him, trembling. Despite facing death, he gives a sly smile. Putting everything in his backpack, Swen notices it is full and decides it's time to return to Luo. As he takes a step, he senses something strange in the air. Quickly, he takes cover behind the wall to hide. Beside him, 2 people walk down the corridor. The guy in the hat asks if the protagonist will give them trouble, but his friend says their boss is a martial arts champion. Wisely, the guy in the red hat asks what if the protagonist has a weapon, and his friend says they have 4 people. The strongest man says he will take the protagonist by surprise by sneaking through the shadows. But before he can do anything, our hero appears behind the thug, ready to strike. With a single blow, the tall, dark-skinned man is already on the ground, unconscious. Our protagonist imagines there must be more of them, as they mentioned a boss. At that moment, a kind of sixth sense makes him feel that Luo might be in danger. Meanwhile, Luo Lansha points her gun, trembling, at the man. Aiming with a tense yet angry expression, the man responds with a sarcastic smile. The 2 thugs raise their hands in surrender. Asking her to lower the gun, the man remains calm, smiling slightly. With a furrowed brow and clenched teeth, Luo Lansha doesn't seem to yield to their demands. In a calm tone, the man says he isn't ill-intentioned and just wants to talk. Still unyielding, she says they have nothing to talk about and that they should leave. Trying to calm her, the man says life isn't as easy as it used to be, and they can help each other and explore together. The 2 of them smile at each other with a malicious tone. Luo tells them not to come any closer, or she will shoot. Boldly, she pulls the trigger forcefully. The 2 are startled by this action, but nothing happens. The gun doesn't fire. The boss grabs her by the arm and says he will teach her something. That before shooting, she should take off the safety first. He gets close to her face and asks what she thinks about going out with him. Putting her hand on his, the boss starts to get excited, getting closer to him and speaking in a neutral tone. Suddenly, her expression changes, and she knees the boss in the groin with all her strength. His whole face contorts with pain, and he is paralyzed by it. Falling to his knees, his henchman asks if his boss is okay. At that moment, she sees an opening to escape and starts running. She begins to run for her life down the corridors of the building, but the henchman's hand reaches her, pulling the girl by the collar and holding her in his arms. She tries to break free and screams because of it. Irritated, the criminal points a gun at her head. In a vile and malicious tone, he says if she moves, he will shoot. Suddenly, something seems to distract the bandit. A noise coming from the dark corridor ahead makes the bandit question what is happening. Unexpectedly, the hamster Shangbiao appears with its bright eyes and an expression never seen before on its face. Sighing in relief, the bandit realizes it's just a hamster. But quickly, the hamster starts climbing up the bandit's leg, crawling inside his pants and biting his leg. As he writhes in pain, Luo Lansha approaches and bites the criminal too. The bandit starts shaking all over, and Luo sees an opening to escape. Irritated with the hamster that won't stop biting him, he grabs it and tries to kill it. But Shangbiao bites his hand before he can crush it. Falling to the ground, the hamster runs back to its owner. Luo Lansha picks it up. Completely enraged, he says he was forced to do this after what just happened, and immediately starts shooting at the girl and the hamster. The girl starts running, and none of the shots hit her. She jumps with all her might into the corridor where she will be safe and protected, managing to land on the stairs without a scratch from the bullets. A bit hurt from the fall, she notices a hand reaching out to her. Tiancheng appears to help Luo Lansha, so it tells her to be quiet and make less noise while taking cover. The criminal starts shouting for the girl to come out of hiding and show herself. His boss appears, calling for the fourth brother. He asks if his boss is okay, and the boss replies that he is, but he almost got screwed because of the girl. Talking, he says that now both of them know they are here because of the gunshots. The thug comments that the girl couldn't have gone far, and his boss says the shots were loud, so the brothers must have heard. Luo Lansha asks what they should do, and Zwa first asks if her leg is okay and tells her not to panic. She says it's nothing serious, just a little sore. Our hero says he will carry her, and the girl reacts with embarrassment and shyness. The protagonist quickly says there is no time to be embarrassed. With the girl in his arms, our survivor starts running extremely fast, commenting that the gunshots will attract the infected. The girl remains embarrassed. As they are almost there, they suddenly run into two of the brothers from the group of criminals. The two point their weapons at the protagonist, smiling maliciously. Turning his head back, he notices the other two brothers also pointing their weapons. On a flight of stairs, the protagonist and Luo Lansha realize they are cornered with no way out and no options. The guy in the red hat mentions that there are still weapons in the storage room that will be left for them. Instigating the protagonist to put Luo down, the boss says they don't stand a chance against four people. Internally, the hero thinks he should have finished off the other two brothers when he had the chance. Gritting his teeth while the girl starts crying, the protagonist knows he has no other option. Suddenly, the boss is in shock. Red lines start to appear on the protagonist's bracelet, resembling flames. His arm glows red as he takes on a stern, unyielding pose. His expression changes, becoming serious and unwavering, bordering on hatred. One of the brothers shouts for the second brother to be careful. Suddenly, the protagonist jumps over one of them, preparing to strike. The second brother watches this happen, stunned. Our protagonist widens his eyes as he sees him firing a bullet from his weapon. With superhuman agility, the protagonist dodges the shot with ease. With his mouth open and eyes wide in disbelief, the second brother can't believe what he just saw. And before he can do anything, he receives a powerful punch right in the middle of his face. A punch that makes the second brother spin and fly. Such is the magnitude of the force. In the blink of an eye, the thug hits the wall, already dead. His eyes roll back, blood trickling from his head and mouth, indicating he is dead. Seeing the scene, the other brother in the red hat looks shocked. Shouting and cursing the protagonist, he draws his pistol and aims at his back. In an instant, the protagonist swings a massive kick to the thug's face. He spins as he takes the kick and spits a lot of blood from his mouth. Below the stairs, the thugs shout for the third brother, who falls down the flight of stairs. Meanwhile, the protagonist calls the girl to leave. Their boss asks if the third brother is okay while the one in the blue jacket keeps shooting. The shots hit the wall next to Luo Lansha, who is startled by the burst. They continue hitting the wall, and none hit the protagonist or his friend. One of the brothers comments that they have disappeared, and the boss tells him to go after them. Looking through the window, they see there's a full trash can down below. He asks her to jump into the trash can and then hide in the car because the place is no longer safe. She hesitates about jumping out the window, but the protagonist encourages and urges her. Still unsure about jumping, Zwa urges her on, saying the attackers have arrived. With the window open, the protagonist gives her a push so she will go. The girl lands safely but irritated in the trash can on the ground floor of the building. Meanwhile, the remaining three brothers approach, armed and furious with our hero. Drawing two swords from his back, our protagonist knows he can't maintain the virus's stimulation much longer. Gaining extreme speed, the protagonist charges at the remaining ones with his weapons in hand. Reacting extremely quickly to Tiancheng's movement, the thugs start shooting in desperation. With superhuman agility, The protagonist dodges all the shots without apparent effort. The boss looks terrified at the human being in front of him, who more closely resembles a monster. At the moment he tries to shoot Zwa, he hits him instead. Seeing his arm fly through the air, the boss panics and screams in pure agony. As the boss is in absolute shock, Zwa takes advantage of it and delivers an extremely powerful kick to his face. The kick sends him flying, possibly breaking some bones. While their boss is sent flying, the other two brothers watch the entire scene in terror. One of them remains paralyzed, while the other starts running toward the protagonist. But Zwa appears in front of both of them in an instant. They look in shock at the monster in front of them. In the blink of an eye, severed fingers fly through the air. They scream in agony from the sharp pain they are feeling as our hero sheathes his swords. Quickly, he grabs both by the neck, lifting them and choking them. He says he doesn't like killing humans. With a wicked expression on his face, Zwa Tianqing says they asked for this. We see a parallel of this scene in an artistic oriental style. While the protagonist continues to hold the two in the air, we see the streets outside. Many footsteps approaching indicate a horde of zombies coming. When the protagonist senses this, he drops the two. Saying he doesn't want to dirty his hands, the protagonist lets nature take care of the two who survived. Noticing that the shots were too high, he knows the location will no longer be safe. He feels that the zombies are already outside. Covering his face, he jumps out of the window and lands on the ground like a superhero. He falls right in front of the zombies. Drawing his sword from his back, he estimates he can hold on for just one more minute. Quickly, he begins to strike with his sword, killing the zombies with ease and focus. He alternates between striking with punches and kicks as well. He defeats a few more infected with ease and a calm expression on his face. Feeling exhaustion set in, he realizes the recoil came too quickly due to the excessive use of his skills. Struggling to keep his eyes open, he can't contain the sweat and heavy, panting breaths. However, in front of him, there is still a horde of hungry and voracious zombies. He tells himself that misfortune always comes in doubles. A bright light comes toward the zombies, which annoys them. Shielding his face from the light, the protagonist feels confused. He notices a huge car with its headlights on, aimed at the zombies. The car speeds up suddenly and runs over the zombies. Inside the car, the protagonist sees Luo Lansha driving and saying that this time she didn't mess up, and he congratulates her. He asks her if she knows how to drive, and the girl says she had practiced before. They decide to leave before the zombies surround them. Accelerating the car, which spews sparks and smoke, they drive away. As the two survivors watch through the window, they see the car leaving. The brother in the blue jacket informs the third brother that they have escaped. The third brother, who is missing fingers, decides he will seek revenge. In shock, the brother tries to say more but seems too scared to do so. Still frozen with fear, he tries to mention the dead, but his speech fails. Finally, he manages to say that they are surrounded by zombies and sees through the window a horde surrounding the police station. On a distant road with mountains and vegetation around, we see the car where the protagonist and Luo are. At dawn, the girl wakes up and quickly calls for her brother Tianqing. Hearing her brother counting the repetitions of his exercises, she is shocked. Tianqing is doing his morning exercises, easily completing 1,000 push-ups. Upon reaching 1,000, he says he's finished and turns to listen to what Luo has to say. Showing his impressive physique, he says he found it harder compared to before since he sweated a lot. The girl says that he is still just a human, and he calmly responds that it was only 1,000 push-ups, and that if he hadn't used the virus too much, he could have done another 1,000. Luo asks about his recovery, and he says it is almost complete since there is no danger around, so he can rest. Lighting his cigarette, he says there's a gas station nearby and that they should go there. With an excited expression, Luo tells him to buckle up. Slamming the accelerator, she makes the car zoom down the road with incredible speed, arriving quickly at the gas station. With his crowbar in hand, he says that someone is nearby and tells the girl to stay behind him. He notices that the door is blocked with 2 iron bars, which means there must be someone alive inside. He asks the girl to hold his pistol and they enter the gas station. Activating his detection ability, he senses someone there but can't determine if they are alive or not. Luo asks if it's a zombie, and Zla says it doesn't matter since he will deal with it either way. Bashing his crowbar against the glass door, he shatters it easily, breaking it entirely and allowing them to enter, but he is startled to see something on the floor. A middle-aged man lying bloodied makes him question if a mutation is occurring. The man with bloodied holes in his face opens his half-closed eyes and looks toward the protagonist. This makes our hero astonished. Reaching out toward Tianqing, the man asks to be saved, and at that moment, the protagonist realizes he is alive. Luo asks how the man can be alive in these conditions, and Zwa says he doesn't know either. Asking the man if he is injured, he only responds with something about his right hand. Tearing the sleeve of his shirt, he sees an intense mutation happening before his eyes and is impressed that the man is alive. Our protagonist's eyes widen as he looks closer at the mutation. He notices something inside the arm that is a black and red color. Drawing his knife, he tells the man to hang on. Suddenly, he thrusts the knife into the man's arm, and Luo feels disgusted seeing the scene. Our hero says he was right as he expected. He removes a piece of the meteorite from inside the man's arm, a rare and shining kind of stone. Luo Lansha is extremely confused by the fact that the piece of meteorite is in the man's arm. Our protagonist asks if the girl remembers the meteor shower, and she says yes, since the apocalypse started soon after. This rock gave rise to the Ebola virus, according to Tiancheng. He says they are alive because they have some immunity to the virus, and just can't touch it directly. He adds that this piece of meteorite will be useful and they can use it later. She asks about the man, and the protagonist says he is already dead and there is nothing they can do. And it was a miracle he lasted this long. But suddenly his hand falls to the side. Quickly, the protagonist moves aside and tells the girl to stay away from him. Suddenly, the man's body, which was supposed to be dead, opens its eyes with a sinister expression, and starts to rise in a sudden and cadaverous manner. The girl starts running to save her life. The zombie of the man lunges at the protagonist with its black and red arm, originating from the meteorite that was in him. The protagonist quickly counters, using his arm to push it away, placing the gun between the zombie's teeth and apologizing before shooting. The girl comes back and calls for Tiancheng, who says he's fine. Looking at his hand calmly, he says he never thought he'd be this lucky. He remembers that in his past life, the piece of the meteorite could be sold for a high value to the public, and he decides to keep it for now. Then they decide to fill up the car's tank. After filling the tank, the girl asks the protagonist about the meteorite's function and if it's dangerous to keep the item with him. He responds by saying that the man who taught him the breathing technique was the first to fuse with a piece of the meteorite. In shock, questioning the fact that he fused with the meteorite, she asks if he ended up like that man. He explains that for the power of the fused meteorite to work, a person needs to evolve 3 more times and reach their limit to handle and use it. The girl asks if anyone has already fused with the meteorite, and he says no. She then questions how he knows this, and he reaffirms that he came back from the future, and the girl just agrees, saying it makes sense. Thinking to himself, the protagonist remembers that he had never found a piece of the meteorite before and now managed to find one quickly and easily. Looking at the sky, he tells himself that this time he will climb to the top, aiming for a better future. We see their car parked in front of the Yojia garage. Awaiting anxiously, Gao warmly welcomes the protagonist. The two look at each other happily at the reunion, while Luo and her hamster observe the scene. Noticing the girl there, Gao is intrigued by her presence, and she shows no reaction. He bluntly asks what if this is his girl, and he quickly replies no. Ironizing the protagonist, he says that the protagonist has quite a heavy taste. Irritated, Gao asks where he got this kid from, and Luo Lansha responds that they are like siblings and steps on the rude kid's foot. Complaining of pain, Gao starts to whine, and Tiancheng says he warned him about her. He asks his friend if anyone came by in the past 2 days, and he says no, as he was ordered not to let anyone in. Thinking to himself, Zhou Tiancheng realizes that the 2 sisters didn't come to the Yojia garage. Gao Aofei asks who didn't come in these 2 days, but the protagonist quickly changes the subject. Soon he says he will introduce the two, introducing Luo Lansha as the daughter of his benefactor, and Gao Fei as his adopted brother. The girl doesn't seem to like Gao much due to his unpleasant comments earlier. Asking the protagonist if he found his wife, he says no, as the city is in chaos, and suggests they go to the Ji municipality. Gao thanks Zhou with a friendly and warm expression, but Zhou says Gao should prepare mentally for the trip. Changing his expression to a more melancholic one, he shows he is already expecting the worst. The 3 sleep in separate sleeping bags in the Yojia garage. Luo Lansha is in a deep sleep with her hamster Shangbiao. Gao Aofei is also sleeping soundly in the bed next to her. However, the protagonist is awake with another focus. He starts practicing the breathing technique to control the Ebola virus and stimulate it. He knows that stimulating the virus at this stage will result in an evolution, but the adverse effects will be quite severe. The weakness and injuries are nothing. The important part is that they will strengthen the Ebola virus in his body. He also knows that if his immune system doesn't keep up with the virus, he could turn into an infected immediately. Breathing heavily, he starts trying to calm down. Looking at his hands, he realizes he managed to control it before the 3rd stage and should use it less. Taking 200 grams of the meteorite from his backpack, he says this is his greatest achievement this time. He recalls that previously the only brave person who did this was Xian with 100 grams of the meteorite. Suddenly, the protagonist is startled to see that his friend Gao is having a very lively dream next to him. His nose starts to bleed when he thinks of something exciting. The protagonist even smiles, seeing how carefree his friend is. Soon, he lies back down next to his friends and closes his eyes. He finally decides that it's time to rest. The night falls outside, and the moon continues to shine on the city streets as they sleep. Soon it is dawn, and we see the outside of the Yojiya garage. Before everyone wakes up, Swa is already in full swing with his intense morning exercise routine. With great effort, clenched teeth, and veins bulging on his body, he reaches 3,000 push-ups. Satisfied, he realizes he has finally recovered from his exhaustion. Meanwhile, Luo gradually wakes up. Noticing the girl is awake, he asks her to get up since they are about to leave and need to set out early. Showing her his arsenal, the protagonist says he will give her some items before they leave. He tells his friends he has 5 weapons. Each one should take one and leave a spare in the car. Irritated, the girl looks at the protagonist and says she wants another weapon. She argues that she doesn't have enough strength to aim and that one weapon won't be sufficient. Still disgruntled, Luo Lansha sighs and accepts her situation. Turning to Gao, the protagonist asks him to put on the combat gear. Holding the gear in his hands, Gao says it looks too ugly, and the protagonist argues that it will save his life. Gao eventually accepts the gear, and the protagonist offers a knife to each of his friends, asking them to keep it with them at all times. They both complete the protagonist's statement by saying that the knives could save their lives in critical situations. Swa, with a serious expression, says it's good they know that. Then he abruptly places a map on the table. Through the map, Gao explains that the journey to G municipality will take about 12 hours, and Luo grumbles that they won't arrive tonight. The protagonist adds that the fastest route is through the city center, and that they should go around it. Luo Lansha questions him about this, saying that they might find resources in the center. Coldly, our hero responds that the meteorite's infection rate is 80% among 12 million people, meaning they will encounter hordes of zombies. 9,600,000 zombies in the city center is a playground for them and a hell for surviving humans. He comments that they can go around the outskirts, which will increase the journey and consequently the travel time, but it will be safer and they will climb a mountain. Gao makes a relevant comment about the fuel supply and that it will run out. The protagonist notes that they have 100 liters of gasoline and that their car uses that type of fuel. But he adds that they should look for gas stations along the way. If they don't find any, they will have to walk the rest of the way. He says he won't drive more than 8 hours a day as they need enough time to train and rest. This way, they will arrive in 2 days. He quickly stands up and aggressively exclaims that they must do one thing first. The two friends look at Swa Tiancheng in shock while he keeps his eyes closed and head bowed. He yells that they will do 500 push-ups and 200 jumping jacks, and they exclaim that they can't refuse the order. Outside, we see Swa filling the car's tank with a gallon of gasoline. As he fills the tank, the two are exhausted and lying on the ground, sweating and panting. Gao dramatically says he is going to die, and Luo Lansha agrees with him. Our protagonist comments that they trained using the virus and are already tired. Annoyed by the comment, Gao starts whining and asks if he is even human after doing 500 push-ups. Whispering in Gao's ear, Luo says that yesterday he did 1,000 push-ups and today 3,000. Our hero says that besides the progression, it increases his endurance, and by evolving twice, he can easily surpass the record of 3,877 push-ups. Soon, they stop stalling and get into the car. We then see the car speeding down the road with a chain of mountains in the background. While the two friends are asleep, the protagonist remains focused and concentrated, driving at high speed. Swa is in the driver's seat, Luo in the front passenger seat, and Gao lying in the back seat. Suddenly, Gao Fei wakes up, feeling a bit disoriented. He asks Tiancheng if he wants to switch places so he can rest, and Tiancheng asks if he knows how to drive. Gao says his father taught him. Gao Fei claims he is a great driver, as good as the protagonist, and warns him not to joke around, as it's dangerous. Swa just tells him not to drive off the railing, and his friend nods in agreement. As soon as the protagonist lies down in the back seat, he falls asleep and starts snoring. Gao accelerates even more, causing the car to emit sparks due to the sudden acceleration. Luo is startled awake. Swa wakes up on the floor, having fallen from his position. He wonders if Gao is really a good driver. Irritated at having been woken from her comfortable sleep, Luo Lansha asks what is happening. Gao, looking dejected, says the road is blocked, and Luo retorts that it's no reason to brake abruptly. Our protagonist gives Gao Fei a severe and intense look. He exclaims for Gao Fei to be quick, but Gao doesn't understand what he's saying. Suddenly, they see a zombie trying to open the car door on Luo's side, and a horde of zombies is approaching to surround the car. Gao doesn't know how to react and starts crying and sobbing. Luo also reacts poorly and starts crying with a look of desperation on her face. Luo exclaims, asking why there are so many of them, and Zwa tells his friend to floor it and accelerate immediately. He obeys and slams the accelerator. Grinding his teeth with a frown and sweating profusely, he focuses on escaping the situation. The large car they are in speeds up, emitting sparks and smoke due to the friction and sudden acceleration. The two friends in the car are pushed down by the speed and gravity. Desperate, Gao asks his friend what to do with the railing in front of them. Our protagonist responds that there is nothing else to do but drive over the railing. Being huge, the car easily destroys the railing and passes over it as if it were paper. Sliding slightly, the car makes a turn, and we see the zombies trying to chase them. With his head out of the sunroof, Swan notices the zombies closing in and shouts for Gao to go faster as they are getting close. Focused but scared, Gao sweats with the stressful situation. He comments that it's hard to go faster on this terrain, as it's uneven and full of rocks on the road. Our survivor reaches into the trunk to get the weapons and tells them to prepare for a fight. The sunroof of the car begins to open. Our protagonist climbs out through the sunroof while the zombies chase them, running extremely fast. With two pistols in hand, he starts shooting without hesitation, gritting his teeth and with a furious expression, shouting for them to die. Some zombies still chase the car even as the protagonist fires his two pistols. Luo Lansha also draws her single pistol and, with difficulty, aims before shooting. Incredibly, she manages to hit an infected right in the head, killing him instantly. One of the zombies falls, and the others keep running. Others fall too, but the ones still on their feet remain ravenous and fierce. Gao shouts to Tiancheng that there is a sewer very close to them, and the protagonist wonders why everything is going wrong. Desperate, Gao asks his friend what they should do now. Swa, also shouting in desperation, tells him to drive over it and floor it. Gao says he's crazy and that if they fall, it will be the end, and our protagonist responds that there's no other choice. They must risk everything. Trying to keep calm despite his desperation and sweating coldly, Gao says that if they don't make it, they will die. He shifts gears and floors the accelerator. Meanwhile, our hero continues shooting at the zombies from the car's sunroof. Luo Lansha closes her eyes, and Gao stares straight ahead, resolutely. The car continues to accelerate as Wu Tiancheng is on the roof shooting at the zombie horde. The car reaches maximum speed. They are face to face with the massive open sewer. Our protagonist looks ahead, anxious and scared. Shocked by what might happen next, Gao closes one eye and grits his teeth. Quickly, the car flies into the air, lifting several meters off the ground and soaring over the sewer. It manages to land safely on the other side without falling into the sewer. The impact of the car landing forces their bodies down with force. On the other side of the sewer, the car skids around a curve, and Gao begins to brake. Outside the car, the protagonist closes his eyes and tries to breathe, saying that they came very close. Then, looking ahead, he seems to notice something. In front of them, they see an ordinary town full of charming, simple houses. Gao comments that they are safe for now but needs to repair the car, and Zwa says they'll have to spend the night there. He asks his friend to lock the car when he's done, as they are going to check the village ahead. The three of them begin to walk together across the large lawn that precedes the village. The sky, with mixed colors of purple and orange, indicates that dusk has arrived and night is also approaching. Zwa Tiancheng looks around, feeling somewhat confused. He comments that something seems off, and Luo asks him what's wrong. He says it's too quiet, with no sounds of zombies nearby. The three enter the village together armed. They look around, checking every corner of the village as our survivor reloads his weapon. Suddenly, someone appears out of nowhere. Without a second thought, Zwa Tiancheng aims his weapon at the person. Both Luo and Gao are startled by the situation. The man, holding what looks like a stick wrapped in bandages, begs him not to shoot. A simple bald man with a friendly face and plain clothes appears, saying he is indeed human. Gao and Luo sigh in relief after the scare. Still aiming his weapon at the man, our hero tells him to drop the stick. Immediately, the man complies and lets go of the stick. As the protagonist thoroughly searches the man, he says he has no ill intentions and soon tells him to be quiet. Gao asks Tiancheng to stop, saying the man seems nice, and suggests not jumping to conclusions. The man, with his hand on his head, timidly offers a friendly, pleasant smile. Our hero asks where the other residents are, and the man replies that some have died and others have left. He adds that he must be the only one left in the village. After all, the adults went to work and the children went to school, leaving only the elderly. He says his name is Dingping and claims to own a shop, never expecting something like this to happen in the world. Gao quickly asks if they can sleep at his place, and the man doesn't hesitate to say yes, as it's been a long time since he's seen another human. With a brusque tone, the protagonist tells him not to worry about his friends, and since the village is empty, they should go to another house so as not to disturb the man. Luo corrects Tianqing, saying the man is being kind and he shouldn't disrespect him. Gao tells Wu that he is too sensitive and that the man has no bad intentions, but the protagonist says it's better to be safe. They tell him that Tianqing is overthinking and it's good to have another person with them. He reluctantly agrees, saying they will continue to be careful. Gao, hugging his friend, apologizes to the man, saying his friend is a bit shy. The man, somewhat shy and awkward, asks them to follow him and shows them to his house. When they arrive at the man's home, he prepares a complete and delicious meal for the adventurers. Modestly, the man says the place is small and hopes he hasn't disappointed them. He tells them not to be shy and to eat as much as they want, and the young people are extremely happy with the warm food. Our protagonist eats slowly and deliberately, and the man notices this and tells him not to be shy. Offering a drink, Swa says the man is being very polite and that their meeting might be considered fate. Thinking about what the man said about fate, he starts to wonder. He questions if he still has the fate of meeting Xianxian again. The man gets up and says they should drink together since fate brought them together. They toast with sake and shout, "Cheers!" Gao, completely drunk, is being carried by the man while singing a song, and Zui is being carried by Luo, talking nonsense. The two fall completely intoxicated onto the man's bed while Zui starts daydreaming about Xianxian. Luo wonders why he drank so much if he knew he couldn't handle it, and why he is talking about Xian again. Dingping, a bit agitated, says there are no other beds in the house and that they'll have to make do with what's available. Luo thanks him, saying it's sufficient. With a somewhat forced smile, the man asks Luo why she isn't dizzy, given that she drank quite a lot. Luo responds that she can't handle alcoholic drinks and poured the liquid into another glass. With a curious expression, the man says he understands. He tells them to rest and promises not to disturb them further. Luo thanks him for everything he has done today. Suddenly, while walking through the house, Dingping ends up in a room with stone walls. He continues walking through a dark, gloomy, and unfamiliar corridor. With a completely different, cold, and distant expression, he reaches a door, places his hand on the doorknob, and opens it. Upon opening, he finds a room resembling a butcher's kitchen, with meat and other items scattered around. There are food remnants stuck to the tools. The floor is dirty with debris scattered about. He walks through the room where various knives and other instruments are spread out. Putting on his gloves, which are also dirty, he comments that he would have preferred to have resolved everything while they were sleeping, but the girl stopped him. Picking up a type of sedative, the man realizes that Swa is very strong and has weapons with him, and the sedative didn't work. Opening a refrigerator, he remarks that he needs to get food for Ayu, as she must be hungry. He holds a still dirty weapon, planning to eliminate all the young people. Meanwhile, Gao Fei sleeps soundly, enjoying a well-deserved rest after all the hardships. Luo can't sleep due to Gao's loud and annoying snoring. Gradually, she tries to keep her eyes closed, but the irritation is too much for her to manage. Frustrated, Luo Lansha gives Gao Fei a gentle push on the head and asks him to let her sleep a bit longer. Despite this, he doesn't wake up as he is dreaming as usual. She gives up and decides to go get a drink. She exits in her slippers, trying not to make much noise in the house. Confused, she searches for the kitchen to get a glass of water and ends up in Dingping's living room. As she walks, she starts to notice something strange. She sees an odd door at the end of the corridor with a stone wall. She approaches and slowly opens the door with her fingertips. Her eyes widen in shock upon seeing what is happening inside that room. She sees things scattered on the floor and the table in front of her, as well as knives and other instruments. Sensing a foul smell, she covers her nose and realizes the place resembles a slaughterhouse. Noticing a two-door refrigerator, she curiously heads toward it. Opening the doors with both hands, the light from inside the refrigerator starts to reveal what it contains. Seeing what's inside, Luo is completely shocked and frightened. A strange object falls right in front of her. Instantly realizing what it is, she quickly closes the refrigerator. In shock and nauseated, she wonders if she ate something strange at dinner. In a different and now threatening tone, Dingping tells her not to worry. Luo turns, frightened, towards the voice of the man, who, from the shadows, says that they were fed with pork meat. Holding a knife, he comments that he was considering whether to let the young people go or not. But with a sinister expression on his face, he says he has already made his decision. Internally, Luo remembers she left her weapon in her backpack, which frightens her. Quickly, Luo grabs one of the knives from the table and holds it to protect herself. With a large cleaver in her hands, Luo Lansha screams in fury for him not to come closer. In the tense environment, the two face each other. Dingping asks the girl if she really thinks she can fight him, and she yells that they both have weapons and the outcome is still uncertain. Internally, she thinks her breathing exercises were useful. Before, she couldn't even hold the cleaver for long. She knows the man also has a weapon and isn't as strong as Tianqing, so she needs to be smarter. Quickly, she throws the knife with all her strength towards the man. Startled, he widens his eyes in surprise, but he manages to dodge easily and avoid being hit. The knife embeds itself in the stone wall. With a surprised and playful tone, he says that was close. Preparing for another attack, Luo asks where Dingping is looking. Quickly, she hits him with a strong blow that makes him double over in pain. He falls to the ground, clutching himself in pain after the hit. He turns completely purple, sweating coldly, and with an expression of acute pain etched on his face. He quickly falls to the ground with his hands between his legs. As he cries out in pain, she runs through the door and escapes. She rushes up the stairs towards the bedroom. However, before she reaches the top, she remembers that Gao and Tianqing are sleeping in the room above. She needs to throw the killer off her trail. A noise behind Luo indicates that the man is already on his feet and approaching her. With a frightening and bloody expression on his face, Dingping brandishes his blood-stained knife and says she won't escape. Defiantly, Luo gives him the finger to insult him, which deeply enrages and unsettles him. Taking advantage of his disorientation, she runs up the staircase, and Dingping orders her to come back. When she reaches the top of the stairs, she notices a sort of basement in front of her. With a furrowed brow and still somewhat desperate, she feels relieved that Dingping hasn't caught up with her yet. Without thinking much, she decides to go down into the basement. Upon descending, she encounters a window lit only by moonlight. Seated with her back to her, and completely tied up, is a girl with her hair tied up, seemingly injured. The girl, facing away from Luo, is trembling and terrified by her situation. Luo approaches and asks if there is anyone in the room, which is covered in blood with remains on the floor. Noticing the woman is tied up, Luo becomes worried and rushes to her, asking if she's okay and saying she's not with the man. When she looks at the woman, she realizes it is an infected, cadaveric, and putrid woman who grunts at her. Luo Lansha is startled and falls backward, thinking the woman is a doll. As she falls to the floor, she notices a partially eaten human hand lying next to her. Quickly, she throws the dead human hand away while the zombie woman continues to scream at her. Luo realizes that Dingping is confining a zombie in the basement of his house. As she says this, she hears footsteps behind her and sees the killer Dingping running towards her. She whispers to herself that he's in the room. Desperate, he opens the basement doors and tells the nosy girl to get out, assuming she's in there. He enters the basement and looks around, trying to find the girl who might be hiding there. While she is hidden behind a cabinet, he continues searching for her and starts to think she might not be there. Looking at the infected woman, he asks what's wrong and calls her dear. He refers to her as Ayu, the woman he brings food from his refrigerator to every night. Placing his hands over hers and kissing her stomach, he says that she is suffering. The girl watching this finds it disgusting that he treats a zombie like his wife. Apologizing to the infected woman, he says he had no choice but to lock her in the basement and tells her not to worry. With his hand gently placed on her face, he says he will keep his love company. However, upon looking at the floor, he notices footprint marks and realizes he's not alone. Still hiding behind the pillar, Luo remains silent as he asks if she's still around, suggesting he knows of her presence. Emerging from her hiding spot, the girl calls him disturbed for keeping someone locked in the basement. Shouting at her, Dingping says she is his wife and that there is nothing wrong with a man taking care of his wife. He exclaims in an excited and agitated manner that no matter what happens, she will always be his dear. Luo tries to bring Dingping back to reality by explaining that his wife is no longer the same, but he denies it, insisting that she is alive. Turning to his wife, he says that she can still move and react. Moreover, he feeds her every day. Embracing Ayu, Dingping insists that she is still his wife. With the knife pointed at Luo, he remarks that his wife hasn't had fresh food in days. Standing before her with a knife in hand and a terrifying expression, he says he will feed her. When Luo Lansha hears this, she is horrified and feels an oppressive pressure in the air as if her body is being forced to retreat. He stops in front of her with a disturbing smile on his face while she backs away. They continue to stare at each other until Luo tries to kick him again. However, he easily sidesteps. Quickly, he grabs her leg firmly. The girl begs him to let her go, and he asks if she still wants to escape. But he says he will turn her into dumplings to feed his wife. He then makes a move to attack with the knife, aiming to wound her leg. Luo's eyes widen at what is about to happen. But suddenly, a loud noise echoes through the room, and a bullet is fired, hitting the man's knife. The bullet lodges in the knife as Dingping stands in shock, and Luo breathes a sigh of relief. Looking in the direction of the shot, they see Tiancheng, the brother, with a gun in hand and a tired expression. Internally, he thinks to himself that he missed the shot. Perhaps he hasn't rested enough. Dingping quickly makes Luo a hostage, pressing the knife to her neck and demanding that Zwe lower the weapon or he will hurt her. The killer realizes that Tiancheng came through the basement window behind him, something he hadn't anticipated. Aiming his gun, Tiancheng orders him to release the girl, but Dingping retorts that it is Tiancheng who should lower his weapon. Upon hearing the word hostage, Tiancheng points his gun at Dingping's wife's head and says that he also has a hostage. Immediately, Dingping panics, screams his wife's name, and tightens his grip on Luo's neck, demanding that Tiancheng lower his gun. Still aiming the gun at Ayu, Tiancheng demands that Dingping release the girl, but he refuses to comply. Coldly, Tiancheng says that he will shoot the woman. Ayu grunts and moves in the chair, trying to free herself. Desperate, Dingping begs Tiancheng not to do it, saying he cannot live without her. Tiancheng proposes a trade, release Luo, and he will not harm Ayu. Crying intensely, Dingping agrees and asks to make the exchange quickly. Meanwhile, Dingping's wife continues to move in the chair. Looking at the man with doubt, the atmosphere is filled with tension. Zwe takes a few steps closer to the group. Dingping's expression is one of pure desperation, with tears streaming down his face. He seems reluctant but agrees to release Luo in exchange for his wife. Before the exchange can be made, the straps holding Ayu break, and she frees herself from the chair. Using her strength, she stands up, finally liberated. The three look at her, immediately shocked and frightened by what they have just seen. Ayu, Dingping's wife, is standing right behind Zwe Tiancheng. The man calls out to his beloved. Taking advantage of the moment, Luo Lansha bites the aggressor's arm and breaks free. She manages to escape his grasp and runs away. Quickly, Zwe Tiancheng, with a serious look, aims his gun at Dingping's wife. He aims with precision, ready to fire. Running towards Zwe, Dingping begs him not to shoot. At the last moment, Dingping positions himself in front of his wife, taking the bullet in his chest. Zwe and Luo look at each other, surprised by Dingping's unexpected action. Dingping falls backward to the ground from the impact of the shot. He lies on the ground, struggling to breathe while holding his chest. With difficulty, he tries to get up and asks his wife if she is okay. The two exchange glances for a moment as a light illuminates the scene. Ayu looks at Dingping with a look that seems almost familiar, as if remembering the past. For a moment, Dingping feels hope that his wife might get better. He recalls the day it all happened. His wife, already infected, had asked him to end her suffering, but he refused. He promised to care for her forever while she feared becoming something she didn't want to be. He embraced her, assuring her that everything would be okay. They embraced, and he promised to always be by her side. Back in the present, Dingping's hopeful look turns to despair. Ayu, now uncontrollable, attacks him. Luo and Tiancheng watch the scene in silence, stunned. Dingping falls to the ground as Ayu, now out of control, turns on him. As she acts unconsciously, Dingping maintains an expression of sadness and horror on his face. They watch all this unfold before them. Then Tiancheng pulls out his pistol and aims at the zombie woman feeding on her husband's body. Without hesitation, he fires, killing her. Noting Luo Lanch's sad expression, the protagonist says that bodies don't feel anything and she shouldn't think too much about it. Moving forward, Zwe tells the girl to follow him since she is standing in shock. With a cold, distant look on her face, she follows him quickly after he orders her to. Before that, however, she quickly turns her face toward the dead couple, and when she realizes that the man is truly dead, she turns back. Ascending to the top of the stairs, the two walk together. Luo asks her friend Tiancheng why the world suddenly became like this, and she says that if it weren't for the apocalypse, Dingping would have been someone with a wonderful wife and a beautiful family. Nodding, the protagonist says that if it weren't for the apocalypse, they wouldn't be here now but rather at school. Lighting a cigarette and casting a resigned and sad look, he says they must accept the fact that the apocalypse exists. Taking a drag from his cigarette, he says this is the only truth that remains. He advises her to do whatever she can to survive. Back at the car, outside on the grass, Tianqing continues smoking his cigarette. Gao asks Luo Lansha to hand him a wrench. The girl asks him if he will really be able to fix the car, and he says he's been working on cars since he was 10 years old. He then passes the wrench to Gao Fei, who is underneath the car working on it. Gao takes advantage of the situation to look up under Luo's skirt. The girl is shocked by the perverted act and hits him, telling him to close his eyes. Gao says he didn't want to see Luo's bored, and she gets annoyed by his comment, with Swa smiling and smoking his cigarette at their argument. Looking at his hand, Swa says he hasn't made any progress since reaching the first stage, and that everything has been very secure. Soon Gao says he has finished the job, and Swa is amazed at his speed. He says yes, and that with the right tools, he could even dismantle a tank. Swa tells them to hurry up since they have wasted a lot of time. The day dawns beautiful, with bright sunshine and mild weather. However, numerous zombies surround a gas station. Gao asks the protagonist about the gas station, and Swa, looking through a kind of binoculars, says there are some infected there. His friend asks if they should find another place, and the protagonist says no. Gao is frustrated with his friend's response, who gives him an ironic and sarcastic smile. Gao, irritated, asks his friend why he's staring at him, and the friend says there's no reason, he just had a good idea. Suddenly, Gao Fei pulls out 2 knives and gets into a combat stance. Gao asks if Swa is really going to force him to kill all the zombies, and the protagonist says he needs to go through tough battles to evolve. However, when the girl tells him to swallow his tears, Swa points at her and says she has to come with him, which surprises her. With a nonchalant expression, Swa asks if he wasted his time teaching them to fight and says they are just zombies. Pointing at the zombies, Luo asks how that amount can be considered small in Swa's eyes. The protagonist responds that they are small fish and he could handle them even before evolving. When Luo tries to justify herself, the survivor interrupts her and tells her to act quickly. Pointing his weapon to the sky, he tells them to remember to survive. Suddenly, the protagonist fires into the sky to make noise and attract the zombies. The two watch the scene in shock as smoke billows from the gun. The zombies in the area all look toward the noise of the shot, thirsty for blood. We see another scene inside a large, 2-story house, apparently rustic. Inside, an infected with spikes on its back crawls on the floor. The spikes on its back seem to be growing in size. Its eyes fill with rage, and veins bulge in its eyeballs. Meanwhile, at the gas station, zombie hands are flying. The two fight fiercely for their survival. On top of a car, Gao slashes the zombies while Luo shoots at them, and they wonder how many are left. One of the zombies comes running up behind Gao, but the boy notices it, turning quickly towards the startled zombie. Before he could be hurt, he uses both of his knives to fend off the zombie and prevent being bitten. Asking his friend Luo for help, she says she's coming to assist. Suddenly, a shot is fired right into the zombie's head, killing it easily. Looking up surprised, Gao sees his friend Zwa with his gun in hand, casually drinking juice. Soon his friend asks what he's looking at and tells him not to mess around in a fight as it could be deadly. Other zombies fall dead during the combat. Meanwhile, Gao Fei continues to cut down the creatures with his 2 sharp knives. Luo continues to shoot with her gun, her sharp aim exploding the heads of more zombies. She looks on with a focused expression as she shoots the undead. Other zombie heads fly through the air. As evening begins to fall, the two collapse onto the ground from exhaustion after spending the entire day fighting zombies. Our protagonist descends from where he was perched to the ground. He coldly tells them that it's not time to rest, and that they should practice the breathing exercise he instructed. The two say that this is inhumane, and that he is crazy. He says that if they are complaining about this, he will soon increase the training, and the two are outraged. Swa Tianqing gives them a deadly stare, as if it were a laser beam. Soon, the two obey and begin practicing the breathing exercises he recommended. The marks of the Ebola virus start appearing on Luo Lanche's body. Swa casts a serious and attentive look at her as he watches her use the technique. Meditating and using the breathing technique, Luo says she needs to do it like her uncle and reach the speed class. The protagonist shifts his focus now to Gao Fei. Looking at him, he says he's close to seeing his friend Gao Fei's progress. He thinks that Gao could be in another place but soon dismisses that idea, saying it's impossible. Suddenly, we see the mansion in the background where a mutation was occurring. It seems like our protagonist feels a strange sensation coming from that place. Drawing his weapons and holding them, he says it's better to be safe than sorry. With his cigarette still lit in his mouth and his weapons in hand, he says he will check out the place where the strange sensation came from. Approaching the large house and its staircase leading to the second floor, he seems to smell blood coming from the location. Entering the house with his weapon in hand, he approaches a dark area with a body on the floor. Passing by the corpses without even looking at them, our protagonist maintains a closed and resolute expression on his face. He moves through corridors, constantly checking his surroundings. Sensing something, his sixth sense seems to notice something approaching behind him. Quickly, he looks back with suspicion and insecurity. At that moment, his eyes widen in shock at what he sees in his field of vision. Suddenly, he is thrown out of the window abruptly and unexpectedly, even blocking the blow with his weapons. Groaning and spitting blood, we see that the protagonist felt pain despite the blow. As he approaches the ground at high speed, he fails to land properly and rolls across the ground. Fallen on the ground, he groans and continues to spit blood from the fall and the impact. But he quickly regains his strength and stands up again. With a pained and irritated expression and a malicious look, he asks who did this to him. His previously indifferent and apathetic look quickly transforms into a genuine expression of despair and fear. Seeing before his eyes an infected with wide red eyes and an apparently rigid armor, which he calls a stalker, he knows that this type of infected likes to fight alone but possesses very good skills. Its sharp and bared teeth prevent the full release of air from its mouth, which escapes between its teeth. Our survivor looks back at the evolved infected with an inflexible expression in his gaze. The stalker charges at him like a monster at high speed with a massive punch. Our hero is startled by its speed and ferocity, but manages to dodge by jumping over the infected with an acrobatic maneuver. Firmly planting his feet on a tree trunk, he uses it to prepare a powerful strike. Launching himself off the tree like a torpedo, he flies toward the monstrous infected, swinging his arm back to gain strength and speed for his attack. Charged with his machete, he surprises the stalker by attacking its back, managing to slice off the spikes protruding from its spine in a horizontal cut. Annoyed by the pain, the monstrous zombie shows no reaction beyond widening its eyes, but it makes no sound, quickly turning with a fast and powerful punch that seems to catch the protagonist off guard. He even widens his eyes upon seeing the stalker preparing the punch. Receiving the massive punch right in the middle of his stomach, our protagonist seems to feel immense pain, and his weapon breaks. From a distance, our survivor flies horizontally a few meters above the ground. He ends up ricocheting off the ground like a stone in a pond, with each impact sending rocks flying. Fallen face down and staring straight ahead, he notices the stalker coming toward him with its vibrant red eyes. With blood in his mouth and eyes revealing his fear, he thinks to himself that he doesn't compare to this infected. The enormous, armored infected being looks down with disdain at our protagonist, who rises after the fall. Suddenly, the monster prepares another massive, destructive punch just like the first one. Ketchup spreads, and the protagonist looks frightened. However, it was not our hero who was hit, but the wanderer, who opens his mouth in a sign of pain. The monster roars loudly in a tone of sharp pain and suffering as the protagonist stares at it in shock, not understanding what happened. In the distance, he notices someone emerging from the mist and guesses who this person might be. Gao Fei, with a silly expression, appears from behind the mist. Zui is shocked to discover that it was Gao who fired the shot with his 2 guns. He probably thought it was someone else. Asking his brother Tianqing to dodge, he begins to fire numerous shots from his 2 guns continuously and frantically. While the protagonist dodges, the wanderer takes several shots right to the face. Zui is astonished to realize that Gao Fei is hitting all his shots right in the monster's face, even from a distance. More bullets are fired from Gao's guns and hit the monster's face, causing it to stagger backward. Running away from the monster, Zui Tianqing says that the wanderer's weak spot is in the temples. Gao shouts at Zui to help him find an opening, and soon his friend throws a rock at the infected being's temple. After being struck, the wanderer seems to get even more irritated. The gigantic creature lunges at Zui with another powerful punch capable of killing him. However, before being hit again, Zui manages to dodge and jump over the creature, which slams the ground with its attack. On top of the creature, he prepares a kick, but the wanderer dodges and grabs his foot tightly, which shocks Zwa. Smartly, the monster, holding his leg, gets ready for another punch that will be harder to avoid. However, the protagonist manages to duck and avoid the blow that would have hit him square in the face. Soon, the infected being begins to spin, aiming to slam Zwa's body against the ground. At that moment, he shouts for Gao Fei to be quick. His friend looks focused and serious with his weapon in hand, as the wanderer lifts Zwa Tianqing by the leg and throws him forcefully toward the ground. Just seconds before Zwa hits the ground, he spots an opening. Gao, with the eyes of a true hunter, sees the opening he needed, clearly identifying the target area, the wanderer's temple, his weak spot. With a gaze akin to a predator hunting in the jungle, the gap becomes fully apparent to him. Screaming to himself that now is the moment, he begins firing with both guns in a frenzied yet calculated manner. One of the bullets hits the target and starts to crack its armor. It continues penetrating the armor and destroying it from the outside. Before he could complete the strike on Zwa Tianqing, the monster is injured, so falls to the ground unharmed, and next to him, the monstrous armored infected also falls, though still alive. Surprised that his shot actually hit the infected and brought it down, Gao celebrates. The monster is severely injured on the ground but still alive. Getting up from the ground, Zwa Tianqing says that the infected is extremely resilient, holding his two hands tightly and pressing them against the skull of the walker. Zwa firmly plants his feet on the ground and starts pulling the head upward. Straining and grunting, we see the difficulty he's facing due to the infected's resilience. But with considerable effort and force, our protagonist finally manages to finish the job. The object flies away, landing on the grass behind Zwa. Zwa asks his friend Gao Fei if he has evolved, and Gao says he thinks so. He comments that his shots were very precise and asks if it's his ability after evolving. Serious, Gao Fei picks up a stone from the ground and tells him to look at a leaf ahead of them. From a distance, they see a leaf slowly falling from a large, beautiful tree. Throwing his arm back, Gao Fei prepares a powerful and precise throw with a very small stone. He hurls it with all his strength toward the leaf on the tree. The stone hits the leaf, which then bounces back against the tree. Zwa Tianqing is very surprised but does not show any exaggerated reaction as Gao begins to boast. Finally, Zwa pats his head and says he deserves congratulations. With his eyes wide open, Gao observes something in the distance. Zwa asks if he can see something at an apparently absurd distance. Gao begins to read 3 numbers from kilometers away from where they are written. The exact 3 numbers Gao read are engraved on a tree, and he says this distance is nothing to him. Gao explains that after the evolution, everything appears slower and clearer to his eyes. Saying that his evolution is extremely rare, Zwa suggests it must be something related to Gao Fei's nervous system. Placing a hand on his friend's shoulder, Zwa tells him to rest while he searches for a sniper for him. With a proud smile and clenched fists in a victorious tone, Gao feels that he can finally help his friend and be useful. Giving Zwa a pat on the back, he says that they are friends and what he is saying is nonsense. Forcing his lip down, he forces a smile and extends his hand for a fist bump, saying he will go wherever his friend goes. The two exchange looks in a genuine, sincere smile of friendship, brotherhood, and loyalty. As evening arrives, they give each other a fist bump and call each other partner, symbolizing their friendship and eternal bond. Meanwhile, Luo closes her eyes tightly to focus on meditation and breathing techniques. Sitting on the ground with her legs crossed and dead zombies around her, she continues using the technique to enhance the Ebola virus. Her eyes suddenly open with a brilliant purple hue, without pupils or irises. She can't hold back some groans of pain, and her head falls back due to the discomfort. With her eyes still completely white, she screams piercingly, and Zwa, startled, starts running in her direction. Gao asks what is happening to her, and Zwa replies that her body has taken a severe impact and can't handle it. Asking Zwa what they should do, the protagonist says there is no other tool but the one he will use, raising the palm of his completely open hand. Without hesitation, he gives the girl a hard slap on the face, which seems to wake her from the trance, surprised and irritated. Waking from the trance and a possible transformation that was about to happen, she becomes angry and starts shouting at Gao Fei. Asking why he hit her, he says it wasn't him. She asks who else it could be, and Gao says it was Tianqing, but she doesn't believe that brothers would do this to her. Smoking his cigarette, Zwa says she was on the verge of transforming, and if it hadn't been for his slap, she might have suffered a mutation. She stops hitting Gao and says that because of Tianqing, she will let him off this time. Our survivor says they will sleep at the gas station that night and leave the next morning. We see young Gao Fei putting his hands on a girl's chest. However, a boy who bullies him pushed him onto the girl. He didn't do it on purpose. Young Gao, completely embarrassed, says it was accidental, and the principal decides to call his parents. The girl's mother starts scolding Gao's mother, saying he is a pervert, and the two begin to argue. Still angry, she says her son was bullied by Gao and insists that they deserve to die, even as he says it was unintentional. Gao Fei's mother begins to take the boy away, while the girl's mother, still angry, shouts for them to come back. They ignore her and continue heading home. His mother looks gently into his eyes and says she believes what the boy is saying. She says that as his mother, she knows he is a very fair and truthful child. She squats down and places her hands on Gao Fei's shoulders, who grits his teeth, trying not to cry. Finally, she says they will go home, and she will cook whatever he wants for dinner. Gao Fei, with a melancholic and nostalgic look, remembers those great memories with his mother. Noticing that Fei's mind is drifting to distant places, Swa asks him what he is thinking about. He quickly says it's nothing and that he is thinking about the past. Arriving in G City, where Gao himself grew up, he tells Swa to turn onto a street ahead. Finally, the three friends park and get out of the car, stopping in front of a large, multi-story residential building. Swa advises them to be cautious, as there are certainly zombies in the area, and Luo tells her hamster to stay in the car. Our protagonist also tells Gao that no matter what happens, he must always follow his instructions. Pressing his lips down, struggling not to cry, Gao wonders how his parents are doing. His friend tells him to stop thinking about it for now and says they will find out when they get inside the building. He instructs them both to remain silent to avoid attracting the infected in the area. Various infected are lying around the path. Others are also piled up in the building's corridors. As they enter through the front door, the trio sees many more bodies scattered on the floor. Gao asks what is happening, and Zui explains that someone must have been there before them, as the injuries are recent. Fei is shocked by this information and starts running quickly down the corridor with his pistol in hand. His two friends shout for him not to run off alone. Quickly, the two friends, startled by Gao's impulsive behavior, chase after him through the building and up a flight of stairs. Swish shouts again for his friend to stop running ahead alone and notices a dark corridor. Luo Lansha asks Tianqing where Gao is, and our protagonist comments that he must be on the same floor. They hear a loud, piercing scream coming from a door further down the corridor and quickly head towards the sound. At that moment, shots start firing frantically from Gao Fei. He is horrified as he fires these shots in a frenzy. The two arrive behind him and see him shooting in another room. Zui Tianqing sees this scene and cannot contain his shock and sadness, calling out his friend's name. Unable to hold himself upright, Gao collapses to his knees abruptly upon seeing what has just happened. He cannot prevent a genuine expression of shock, his mouth open and eyes wide and empty. His expression of shock becomes more severe as he looks at the scene before him, the emptiness in his chest growing. He turns his eyes and head downward, trying to deny what he is seeing. Zui runs toward his friend, who is on the floor with his hands on his head, asking if he is alright. He quickly notices the open door and looks towards it, experiencing the same shock as his friend. He sees a corpse in a troubling situation. The body is hanging with various marks, making everything even more unsettling. Gao Fei cannot hold back the tears streaming down his face as he calls for his mother, his voice choked with sobs. In a complete breakdown of sadness and denial, he screams loudly and desperately for his mother. Luo Lansha and Zui Tianqing are also shocked to see the scene and Gao's reaction to finding his mother now deceased. On his knees with his shoulders hunched and tears continuously streaming, Gao cries like a child, overwhelmed with deep sorrow. Zui, analyzing the scene coldly, comments that someone did this deliberately to have her eaten alive by zombies. The tears continue to flow, reflecting the deep sadness the young man feels at this moment. Zui lets out a sad, sympathetic sigh, feeling compassion for his friend Gao Fei's situation. Consumed by anger and also empathetic toward her friend, Luo asks what kind of monster would be capable of such an act. Gao Fei slowly gets up with his head lowered while Luo, still on her knees, tries to comfort him. She tries to call out to Gao gently, but he does not seem to hear her. Still in tears, he stands up and stands beside his best friend, Zui Tianqing. Entering the room, he comes face to face with his mother's body. Reaching out his hand towards her, Gao cannot control his trembling and calls out to her. The hair of his mother covers her eyes, but something bizarre is visible hidden behind the hair. At that moment, she wakes up and tries to bite Gao while making extremely loud and shrill noises, but Zwa saves him by pushing him back. As his friend saves him from being bitten by his own mother, Gao Fei watches the scene and cries even more. At this moment, realizing his mother has turned into an infected and is screaming like a ferocious, irrational monster, tears continue to flow down his face as the empty expression in his eyes takes over completely. In denial, Gao Fei keeps trying to tell himself that this isn't really happening. He clenches his fists, holding back many emotions, including, undoubtedly, anger. His expression and gaze change, and Gao seems consumed by hatred, his teeth gritted and his eyes narrowed. Gao starts running wildly and impulsively while his two friends tell him to stop running and stay with them. Zwa fires his weapon, shooting at the ceiling. The shot was fired at the ceiling just to jolt Gao awake with the loud noise while Luo holds him still. Zwa asks Gao, who is facing away from him, where he is going, and Gao responds that he is going after the person who did this. With his eyes fully consumed by rage, veins bulging, and a fixed stare, he says he will eliminate everyone responsible. Zwa asks Gao rational questions to bring him back to reality, asking if he knows who did this or why it was done, trying to bring his friend back to reality. He acknowledges that he understands Gao is not okay, but that revenge will not solve anything. After saying what Gao Fei needed to hear at that moment, Zwa turns to leave the place. While closing the bathroom door where his mother was, Zwa says they have something important to do now. After his statement, he closes the door, leaving behind a great deal of pain. Saying they need to give her peace, our protagonist aims his weapon at the room. Luo Lanshao looks down with a sad expression, trying to avoid the scene, while Gao Fei grits his teeth, trying to control his emotions. Suddenly, a loud bang from the gunshot echoes throughout the area. Dusk falls outside the residential building where Gao Fei lived with his family in Ji. Kneeling in front of an improvised grave for his mother, marked by a board on a large stone, is Gao Fei. He cannot stop the tears streaming down his face for even a single second. Zwa calmly mentions to his friend Gao that they might have forgotten something crucial. When Zwa says that Gao's father might still be alive, Gao Fei is completely shocked, and a spark of hope ignites in his soul. Standing up abruptly and recalling his father, Luo asks him if his family had any recent conflicts with anyone. At this moment, he pauses to think and repeats Luo's question to try to remember something. At this moment, we see a large warehouse with an abandoned appearance. A blond man in formal attire is thrown into the warehouse with superficial wounds. Two men with sinister expressions, after throwing the man into the warehouse, report to their boss that they have returned. When the boss approaches the fallen man, he immediately recognizes him as Gao Ji. The blond man on the ground, frowning and gritting his teeth in anger, says he knows who the boss is. We see a large, burly man with a cigar and a mohawk, and the trembling man on the ground refers to him as Fat Wei. The burly man, with an expression of disdain and superiority, looks Gao Ji up and down and says that Gao Ji probably didn't expect this to happen today. Gao Ji, crawling on the ground like a beast hunting in the wild, says he will deal with Fat Wei. Without effort, Fat Wei delivers a massive, powerful punch to Gao Ji's back, causing him to sink into the floor. Falling face first to the ground, he bleeds even more as Fat Wei calls him ignorant. Standing and speaking with his men, Fat Wei tells them to take Gao Ji away and take good care of him. When Fat Wei asks about Gao Ji's wife, his henchman laughs and says he did exactly as ordered, leaving her behind at that location. Showing off his gold tooth, Fat Wei, while smoking his cigar, says that his henchman did very well. The henchman then shows his boss a genuine gold Rolex watch and says he found it at Gao Ji's house. Recognizing that the job must have been difficult and complex, the boss says he will reward his henchman, who thanks him for the gesture. Suddenly, we see the large vehicle with the protagonist and his friends speeding through the city. Zwa seriously asks who this Fat Wei is, and Gao Fei says he is his father's business rival. He explains that Fat Wei is involved with the underworld, yet he's still lost to his father. 2 years ago, his father reported Fat Wei for illegal activities. Zwa comments that the men who raided his house weren't thieves since they didn't take supplies, and they likely sought revenge. The protagonist asks if he is the only one, and Gao Fei says his parents weren't much for fighting, so there's no one else but him. Flooring the accelerator, Zwa makes the car take a sharp turn. With a serious and vengeful expression on his face, he asks them to hand him the map. On the map, he marks the flower factory, the walls of the old city, and the DM. Swa says these are the 3 locations, and Luo Lansha asks why these places. He comments that it's only been 2 weeks since the disaster, so only these 3 locations in the G municipality can be used as a base. With anger in his eyes and gritted teeth, Gao Fei asks where Fat Wei might be. Swa says he cannot be completely certain, but they need to check these places to find out his whereabouts. He asks Gao Fei, who is consumed by rage, where the tallest building in the municipality is. They then stop in front of a massive building with countless floors and an enormous width. Suddenly, we see an infected person flying through the air and then landing on the ground, severely injured. We see Gao with an empty expression, different from how he was before, and he is the one who threw the zombie this way. Swa observes the scene without reacting or commenting, simply letting Gao release all his accumulated anger. Luo Lansha gently comments to Tiancheng that Gao doesn't seem well. Swa tells her that everything that happened to him was very sudden, and there's nothing they can do. He simply tells her to let him de-stress and vent all his anger, taking it as training to become stronger. Finally, they reach the top of the tallest building in the G municipality, and Gao prepares his binoculars. Swa comments that this spot is great because they can see both the dam and the factory at the same time. With a face filled with fury, Gao Fei says that they are the ones responsible. Swa asks if his father is there, while Gao hands him the binoculars to see for himself. Looking through the binoculars, Swa asks Gao if that's the flower factory. Gao confirms and also mentions a white car. He notes that they must have captured his father and killed his mother, and that confronting them will be difficult since the factory is fortified. It would be very hard to break in. Abruptly, Gao Fei slams his hand hard on the table to get attention. He declares that he will avenge his mother's murder, even if it costs him his own life. Placing a hand on his shoulder, Swa Tiancheng says he didn't bring Gao here for him to die. He emphatically states that if Gao wants revenge, he first needs to calm down. With a calm and cheerful expression, Luo Lansha tells them to look at something. She points to something below and tells them to look quickly. The 2 look down in surprise and spot a supply backpack with about 3 different packages that must contain a lot of things. A week after the outbreak, many countries sent these backpacks to help, and their country was one of the first to receive this aid. With a knife in hand, Swa comments that, thinking about it, the first shipment of supplies should have already been sent. They descend to the surface and decide to check what's inside the supply boxes, discovering ammunition among other items. Swa finds a Type 56 semi-automatic rifle with a 400-meter range and immediately starts testing it and its precision sights. He soon decides to hand the rifle to Gao, saying that it should bring out his maximum precision potential. Gao begins to get accustomed to the rifle while Tiancheng and Luo search through the rest of the items. Wide-eyed with a great discovery, he says he has found something important. He is thrilled to have found a scope that fits a precision weapon, which will be very useful for the current situation. He asks Gao Fei if he knows how to use the scope, and Gao confirms that he does. Attaching the scope to his Type 56 rifle, Gao appears focused and interested in the weapon he has just received. He tells Gao to wait for him and Luo Lansha right there on top of the building. Gao shouts at Swa saying he can't do that. He has to kill the criminals with his own hands. Lighting his cigarette, Swa Tiancheng says that since Gao is his brother, his revenge is Swa's revenge too. He advises Gao Fei to use his weapon wisely, as it will be crucial for carrying out his vengeance. With a tearful expression, Gao thanks Swa, and the protagonist says that's what brothers are for. Night falls, and at the flower factory, there is tight security with numerous armed guards and spotlights to detect possible intruders. While the trio hides and takes cover behind a car, Swa asks Gao if he can see anything. Gao responds that not only can he see, but he has also discovered he has night vision capability. He mentions seeing 3 people, all armed, on top of a roof. He notes that everyone there must have received supply backpacks, as they are using Type 56 rifles just like he is. Luo Lansha, feeling uneasy, says they need to discuss their plan again since there are so many weapons involved. Suddenly and impulsively, Swa Tiancheng stands up. Desperately, Luo asks what he's doing and says they'll be discovered if he continues. He responds tersely that she'll understand once she reaches the first stage. He adds that no plan is needed to deal with these people, and while saying this, he draws his knives from his back. One of the armed guards has fallen asleep and is snoring deeply. The other henchman says that night patrol is a very complex task, and the other, also drowsy, says they can't do anything more. Even though he is sleepy, he notices some strange movement below. Alert, he calls his friends and asks what is going on down there. Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, Please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.